It was the 9th year of the Jingguan era in the Great Tang Dynasty. I was walking down the busy streets of Chang'an when the shouting started. "Quick! Move aside! Get out of the way! His Highness the Prince of Shu is coming," a pedestrian yelled, nudging a nearby street vendor. The vendor didn't look scared. "What's the rush? The Prince of Shu doesn't bully common folk like us." "You don't understand," the pedestrian hissed. "I heard he's heading out to find trouble with Zhang Sun the eldest." The vendor's face went pale. Without another word, he packed his stall and dragged it as far back from the main road as he could. It was true. As Li Ku, the Prince of Shu, I had a decent reputation with the commoners. I had helped refugees and never flexed my royal muscles against the poor. But when it came to the sons of the nobility, that was a different story. Zhang Sun Chong, the eldest son of the Zhang Sun clan, was my favorite target. Before the 5th year of Jingguan, I only gave him a beating maybe 7 or 8 times a year. But ever since the news broke that Princess Changle was supposed to marry him, his life had become a living nightmare. I had already sabotaged the wedding, and now he averaged 1 beating a month. Last month, word on the street was that I thrashed him because he stepped into a shop with his left foot first. As I walked, I heard the whispers and felt a bit annoyed. "You're all slandering me," I muttered under my breath. I didn't have time for Zhang Sun Chong today. Besides, the left foot rumor was a lie. He was beaten because he stepped into that shop, saw me, and tried to back out. I couldn't let that slide. Today, I was on a mission to have a showdown with my cheap, old man, the Emperor. I wanted to take up my post in Ezhou. I had been in this world for 8 years, and the Goldfinger system in my head was finally ready. Tucked inside my robe was a gun of truth, a weapon that definitely didn't belong in this era. Armed with that, I felt invincible. I was done with Chang'an. My father had recently started grooming Li Tai, and the constant bickering between the 1st and 4th brothers was driving me insane. Neither of them would end up as emperor anyway, so why bother fighting? I didn't want any part of that mess. Being emperor sounded like a nightmare. Waking up earlier than a rooster, sleeping later than a dog, and working harder than a tenant farmer. No matter how well you did, some official like Wei Zheng would still scream at you, and you couldn't even talk back. Ezhou was different. It was the future Chengdu playing. The mountains were high, the emperor was far away, and the roads were treacherous. I could be a local king there. I wouldn't have to manage the daily grind, but I'd still be the boss. "Your Highness," a brave soul shouted from the sidewalk. "I heard Zhang Sun the eldest hasn't left his mansion yet. Maybe you should wait for him." I laughed. "Look at you, giving me tips. Don't ruin my reputation. I'm a man of culture now. I'm not going to fight. I'm going to talk reason." The crowd erupted in laughter. A man of culture? Talking reason? Even the chickens in Chang'an would laugh at that. Everyone in the Tang dynasty knew I had the emperor's face but the wild, stubborn personality of General Cheng Yaojing. Actually, even General Cheng reasoned with people sometimes. I just used my fists. I ignored them. They didn't understand me. As a soul from the future, I knew history books were just cold words. To survive in this era without getting executed for being different, I had to be proactive. If you're wild and rebellious from the start, people eventually get used to it. Once you're known as the unruly prince, you can say whatever you want, and no one takes offense. It was a calculated move to stay alive, and honestly, it had been a long, tearful road to build this reputation. I really wasn't going to hit Zhang Sun Chong today. I mean, I hadn't hit him yet this month, but tomorrow would be soon enough. I headed straight for the palace. I hated carriages. In this era, wooden wheels on stone roads were pure torture. Since arriving here, the only things I focused on were training my body and practicing martial arts. I was strong. I had to be, otherwise, I wouldn't survive my father's frequent canings. It wasn't a court day. I reached the Taiji Palace and grabbed a passing eunuch. "Is my father at the Liangyi Hall?" The eunuch jumped, startled. When he saw it was me, he relaxed and bowed deeply. "Yes, Your Highness. His Majesty is handling state affairs there." "Are there other ministers with him?" "No, he is working alone." "Carry on then." I walked away, leaving the eunuch wiping sweat from his forehead. People called me a brute, but I was actually quite kind to the servants, unlike my 4th brother. If that eunuch had missed seeing the 4th prince, he'd have lost a layer of skin. I reached the Liangyi Hall and didn't bother waiting for an announcement. I just shouted, "Dad." I'm here. I had used that term for years in private. At first, it was weird for Li Shimin, but he eventually got used to it. In the Tang dynasty, you usually called your father Yi or even brother, but my modern habits were too strong. I stuck with Dai, a term that had existed since the Three Kingdoms, but wasn't exactly the official royal way to address an emperor. Inside, Li Shimin sighed. He often wondered how he and consort Yang, both relatively calm people, had produced a son like me. If I didn't look exactly like he did when he was young, he would have had some serious questions. By now, my casual greetings were the least of his worries. Compared to the trouble I caused, being called Dad was a blessing. I pushed the door open before he could even invite me in. Why are you here again? Li Shimin asked, his head buried in mountains of paperwork. Look at you, Dad. Can't a son visit his father without a reason? I grinned, walking over and plopping down into a chair near him. The chair was my own invention. I didn't know how to make glass or soap. I was an electronic engineering student in my past life, which was useless here. But I did know how to make a comfortable chair. I wasn't about to spend my life kneeling on the floor. The chairs were my own design. Sitting in the Tang dynasty was a nightmare. The traditional mats and low stools were incredibly uncomfortable. Once I perfected the design, I made sure my cheap dad got the first one. Naturally, the trend caught on, and now chairs were spreading throughout the empire. It would be a miracle if you didn't irritate me, Li Shimin said, finally looking up from his scrolls. He sounded annoyed, but I could see the underlying warmth in his eyes. I knew my father well. To the world, he was the powerful emperor who had seized the throne at Xuanwu Gate. Deep down, he was a man terrified that his own children would repeat his bloody history. Most of my siblings were terrified of him. They were stiff, formal, and distant. But I was different. I acted like a brat, spoke my mind, and treated him like a real father. I was like the military ruffians he used to lead, Cheng Yaojin and Yu Qigong. Because I didn't treat him like a god, he felt a genuine connection with me. Spending time with me was probably the only time he could actually relax. So, Dad, you seem to be in a good mood today, I said, flashing a grin. Li Shimin immediately grew suspicious. What do you want? What did you screw up this time? Is that all I am to you? A troublemaker? I sighed, feeling genuinely offended. Isn't it? He shot back, narrowing his eyes. Since you were 8, someone has been complaining about you every other day. I'll be lucky if you don't irritate me to death before my time. I cleared my throat and quickly changed the subject. That was just youthful energy. I've grown up now. Actually, I'm here because I have a favor to ask. I'm listening, he said, remaining as steady as a mountain. He knew better than to agree to anything before hearing the details. I want to go to my post, I said, laying my cards on the table. I want to leave for Izhou. Li Shimin froze. Your post? Izhou? Why the sudden urge to leave? He looked at me like I was planning something devious. Most princes would do anything to stay in the capital where the luxury was. Nobody wanted to move to the provinces unless they had to. It's not sudden. I've thought about it for a long time, I said bluntly. I don't want to get caught in the middle of the mess between big brother and fourth brother. It's annoying. I didn't hold back. Other people were afraid to speak the truth, but I knew my father's rhythm. Historically, the crown prince Li Chengxian wouldn't rebel for another 8 years, but the pressure was already building. My father was starting to favor Li Tai, the fourth prince, giving him hope for the throne. The tension between them was thickening by the day. Being the crown prince was a death trap, and the emperor's seat was a throne of thorns. Who would even want to be the emperor? I muttered. Li Shimin's brow furrowed. What have you heard? I don't need to hear anything, Dad. Let's be real. There are rumors everywhere that you're going to depose the crown prince and replace him with Li Tai. Don't tell me you don't know. Bang! Li Shimin slammed his hand on the desk and stood up, his face flushed with rage. Nonsense. Who told you that? Any other sibling would have been shaking on the floor by now. But I just stood my ground. After 8 years, I knew his temper. He might kill a minister for saying that, but he wouldn't kill his son. Honestly, I suspected half of his anger was just for show. Dad, stop it. Don't be angry, I said, shrugging. You've been mad at me my whole life. What are you going to do, scare me? If it makes you feel better, go ahead and give me 20 strokes with a cane. Just let me finish. The wind went right out of his sails. He sat back down, looking defeated. I had officially made him temper-proof over the years. Fine. Speak your piece, he grumbled. He wasn't above using a bit of rough language himself. He had spent too much time in army camps with soldiers to be a refined scholar all the time. I just want to go to Ijo, I repeated. I don't want to be part of this drama. I just want to be a carefree prince. Don't you have any ambition? Li Shimin asked, looking like he wanted to strangle me. You came all this way just to tell me you want to be a lazy royal? Dad, we're family, let's be honest. Even if I had ambition, what's the point? Big brother is the crown prince. Even if you get rid of him, do I really have a chance? I ignored his changing expression and kept going. Since I don't have a shot, I might as well enjoy my life. As the poem goes, when things go your way, enjoy them to the fullest. Don't let your golden cup sit empty under the moon. Li Shimin blinked, stunned by the line of poetry. Behind him, his personal eunuch, Chong Lin, was breaking out in a cold sweat. Chong Lin had seen everything in this palace, but every time I showed up, he looked like he was having a heart attack. No one else dared to speak to the emperor like this. I was the only one who had earned this right through years of canes, house arrests, and lost allowances. Li Shimin looked me up and down with a strange expression. It was like he was seeing me for the first time. He knew I was a brat, but he didn't realize I saw the political situation so clearly. But his studies had always been top tier. Why wouldn't you have a chance? Li Shimin asked. He didn't mind discussing this with me. If it were anyone else, he'd never entertain the topic. But with me, it didn't matter. He knew my personality. I was the kind of reckless brat who would discuss deposing the crown prince right to my big brother Li Qingqian's face. To my father, I was just a hothead. Dad, can we stop lying to ourselves? I rolled my eyes. Just look at one thing. Who is my mother? She's a princess from the previous dynasty. With that identity, do you really think those ministers would ever let me be the crown prince? Let's stop joking around. Li Shimin glared at me. If anyone else spoke to him like that, he would have ordered 40 strokes of the military cane immediately. But with me, it was useless. I had been beaten since I was a kid. Military canes were like daily meals to me. They had lost all deterrent power. Besides, he couldn't actually bring himself to kill his own son. He'd tried being ruthless a few times, letting the guards strike for real until my backside was a bloody mess. But my personality never changed. What could he do? Who told you that? Li Shimin snapped, sounding a bit flustered. I'm the emperor. I decide who the prince is. What does your mother's background have to do with anything? He knew it was the truth, but he could never admit it. Really? I don't believe you, I said casually. You're going to be the death of me. Li Shimin nearly choked on his rage. What kind of tone is that? Are you looking down on your father? Oh, come on, Dad. I didn't come here to ask for the throne. To be honest, even if you gave me the emperor's seat, I wouldn't want it. Just let me go to my post. I cut off his rising anger before it could boil over. Li Shimin stared at me, confused. Why would I reject the one thing everyone else killed for? Tell me, he growled. Why don't you want to be emperor? Give me a reason, or you're getting 40 strokes before you leave. Because the hours suck, I blurted out. You have to wake up earlier than a rooster and sleep later than a. I caught myself. If I finished that sentence, I was definitely getting beaten. I was used to it, but nobody likes physical pain. Sleep later than what? Keep talking, Li Shimin sneered. He knew me too well. He knew exactly what kind of nonsense I was about to spit out. Sleep later than the night watchman. I pivoted quickly into flattery. Look at you, Dad. You work so hard for the people of the Great Tang. Like a silkworm spinning until it dies, or a candle burning itself to ash for the common folk. You endure the pressure from the great noble families just to protect the ordinary people. You're a hero. I just don't have that kind of spirit. Li Shimin looked at me with a bizarre expression. Where did you copy those lines from? Copy? Dad, who do you think I am? I'm the son of the former Prince of Qin, the current emperor, and the future Great Khan. Why would I need to copy? Li Shimin sighed, waving a hand. Fine. You just want to leave. But even if you don't want to get involved in the palace drama, why do you have to go to Ijo? Dad, haven't you heard the saying? I sighed dramatically. Once you're in the world of men, you're no longer your own master. I need distance. Li Shimin studied me. He seemed surprised that I actually had some brains behind my bratty exterior. Fine. Going to your post isn't impossible. But your current title is the Grand Commandant of Ijo. If you go, You have to take full control of the military and administration. No, I shouted. Dad, listen to me. That's a bad idea. Historically, giving one person total power in a region leads to corruption and rebellion. It's better to separate the military and the administration. The military handles defense, the civil officials handle the government, and they keep each other in check. If you're worried about generals becoming too powerful, just rotate them regularly. Better yet, start a military academy. You be the principal. Train the middle-ranking officers yourself so they're loyal only to you. As for princes like me, we should just have titles with no real power. That way, we can't cause trouble even if we wanted to. Just give me a hollow title and send someone else to do the actual work. I spoke with total sincerity. Beside us, Li Shimin and his eunuch Chong Lin looked like they had seen a ghost. It was like a brute suddenly started teaching a master class on political science. The ideas were brilliant, but Li Shimin saw right through me. You're saying all this just so you can sit around and do nothing, aren't you? Li Shimin's anger flared up again. I've worked my life to build this empire, and I get a son who just wants to be a lazy bum. Look at you. You spend all your time running that lie trading firm. Don't you know that merchants are at the bottom of the social ladder? Oh, please, Dad, I shot back. Everything you eat and wear costs money. That's what merchants do. How do the people in Chang'an get goods from all over the empire? Merchants. You can't eat the meal and then curse the cook. Li Shimin's eyebrow twitched. Are you begging for a beating today? I nearly jumped out of my skin. When he said he'd hit me, he meant it. Wait. No. I'm sorry. Dad, look, we're the imperial family. The whole world belongs to you. That social hierarchy stuff? That's for other people to believe, not you. Farmers are the foundation, sure. But what about craftsmen? Without them, we'd be farming with sticks. Without them, our army wouldn't have the best weapons. Without them, there would be no bridges, no ships, and no palace for you to sit in. The carriages people travel in, the bowls and chopsticks we use to eat. Every single thing is connected to craftsmen. And yet, we place these essential people third on the social ladder? Does that seem right to you? Then there are the merchants at the very bottom. Everyone says merchants are just greedy profit seekers. But look around. Look at the powerful noble clans. Which one of them has actually given up on business? Look at the high-ranking officials. Which one of them doesn't own a few trading firms or is under someone else's name? Merchants handle the most important logistics in the entire empire. We only have a few granaries in the Great Tang. For a massive city like Chang'an, who brings in the grain if not the merchants? Who brings the cloth? Merchants make the Tang dynasty prosperous. They are an indispensable link in our society. Finally, let's look back at the top of the list, the scholars and the noble clans. So many of them are just parasites, living off the blood and sweat of the common people. The biggest group of pests in the country gets to be ranked number one. Why? It's simple. They monopolize the books. They use knowledge as a tool to control the masses. I know you don't like hearing this, Dad, but there's a saying, dynasties change like flowing water, but the noble families remain like iron. I had completely let loose. In the past, I wouldn't have dared to say these things, but now I didn't care. If things went south, I'd just run away. With the knowledge in my head, the world was my oyster. I could go anywhere. Li Shimin looked at me with a strange expression. Have you forgotten? Our Li family is also a noble clan. Aren't we just pretending to be one of them to fit in? I blurted out instinctively. Li Shimin's eyes nearly popped out of his head. I could see the veins on his forehead throbbing. You brat, where the hell did you hear that nonsense? Haha, misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding, Dad. I waved my hands frantically. Look, our situation is different now. We're the imperial family. We represent the whole country. We have to think about the common people. We can't be lumped in with those selfish noble clans. I spoke as fast as I could to save my skin. So, for the sake of the imperial family's reputation, I have an idea. I'll go to Ijo to take up my post. I'll oversee the development there and improve the lives of the people. They'll be so grateful they'll set up ancestral tablets to pray for your long life in every household. No, Li Shimin said without a second thought. Why? I was stunned. I didn't expect him to agree immediately, but this rejection was too fast. He didn't even pause. Just a moment ago, he was complaining that I didn't want to work. No reason, Li Shimin said, glaring at me. I'm not dead yet. You haven't fulfilled your filial duties, and you already want to run away? Dream on. You're staying right here in Chang'an. Dad, you're always complaining that I cause trouble and make you angry here, I pleaded. If I go to Ijo, I'll be out of your sight. You won't have to worry about me. Out of sight, out of mind, sure, Li Shimin said flatly. But then, when I feel like hitting someone, who am I going to find? I felt a chill down my spine. Don't do that. Look at Li Tai. He's getting so fat because he doesn't exercise. You should hit him instead. You want him to take over for Big Brother anyway, right? As they say, when heaven is about to place a great responsibility on a man, it must first suffer his mind and exhaust his body. Hitting him is basically training him. Li Shimin and Chong Lin just stared at me. Get out, Li Shimin growled. I'm telling you, it's a no. If you say one more word, I'm giving you 10 strokes with a military rod. He wasn't joking. Fine. You're the boss. You're amazing. I can't afford to provoke you, but I can definitely hide. I didn't say another word. I turned around and bolted out of the hall. 8 years of experience told me that if I stayed, those 10 strokes were guaranteed. As I disappeared, Li Shimin didn't even tell me to keep our conversation a secret. He knew me. I might act like a fool in front of him, but I never gossiped behind his back. Still, his heart was far from calm. My personality hadn't changed, but the things I said today had hit him hard. Chong Lin, Li Shimin called out. Your Majesty, Chong Lin bowed quickly. What do you think of Li Ku? Do you think those ideas were actually his own? Chong Lin hesitated. It wasn't a simple question. The Prince of Shu might be a bit unconventional, but he is certainly not stupid. On the contrary, he is very bright. Your Majesty, do you think Duke Chung is a fool? Li Shimin nodded. Cheng Yaojin looked like a bumbling idiot, but he was as sharp as they come. But my words today, even the high-ranking ministers wouldn't have dared to say them. As for letting me go to Ijo, Li Shimin dismissed the thought immediately. He had grown fond of having me around to vent his frustrations on. Besides, out of all his sons, I was the one who actually made him feel the most at ease, even if I did drive him crazy. Walking away from the Liangyi Palace, I felt depressed. Something was wrong. I thought that by showing off some political insight, I could convince my cheap dad to let me go. I expected him to think it over. Instead, he shut me down instantly. This wasn't following the script at all. I had been reading him perfectly for 8 years. What changed today? I couldn't figure it out, and it made me annoyed. I needed to blow off some steam. Where is Zhang Sun Chong? I wondered. Maybe I should go see if he stepped into the palace with his left foot first today. I haven't beaten him up yet this month. I headed straight for the palace gates. I hadn't gone far when I ran into a group of palace maids walking hurriedly toward me. I recognized the leader. She was one of Empress Zhangsuan's personal attendants. Greetings, Prince of Shu, they said, bowing quickly. Why are you all in such a hurry? I asked. Where's Chang'e? Your Highness, the Empress has summoned Zhang Sun Chong to the palace, the lead maid explained. We are going to find the princess and bring her back. My eyes lit up. Zhang Sun Chong is in the palace? Where is he? Talk about perfect timing. I was just thinking about him, and here he was. He should be on his way here now, the maid stammered, looking confused. Got it. Carry on. I waved them off and started sprinting toward the palace entrance. The maid stood there in shock. Then, the realization hit the lead maid like a ton of bricks. Quick, you guys go find the princess, she shouted. I have to inform the Empress. The Prince of Shu is definitely going to cause trouble for young Master Zhang Sun. She turned and ran back the way she came. Everyone knew I had no love for Zhang Sun Chong. We had been fighting since we were kids, and if the Empress had summoned him, I was definitely going to intercept him first. I didn't waste any time. I sprinted toward the path leading to Lijing Hall, the one route I knew he had to take. I was fast. Even from a distance, I spotted Zhang Sun Chong walking with a group of palace guards. The moment I saw him, I didn't think. I just charged. Zhang Sun Chong, I roared as I ran. Are you still dreaming about marrying my sister? My voice echoed, but my body was already there. Since the moment I crossed over into this world, I might have slacked off on some things, but I never neglected my martial arts training. Zhang Sun Chong, who was chatting with the guards, nearly jumped out of his skin at the sound of my shout. When he looked up and saw me barreling toward him, he froze. Li Ku, why are you here? His reflexes kicked in, and he turned to bolt. But I was already on him. He was just a frail scholar. There was no way he could outrun me. Within a few steps, I had him cornered. Your Highness, I was summoned. Zhang Sun Chong started to yell, trying to explain. Thud. I didn't let him finish. I buried a heavy fist right into his eye socket. He let out a muffled cry of pain, the rest of his words dying in his throat. Realizing he couldn't escape, he dropped to the ground, curled into a ball, and covered his head with his hands. You're getting bolder, aren't you? I shouted, landing a few more hits for good measure. You see me and you run? Am I some kind of monster? You're just asking for a beating. Underneath his arms, Zhang Sun Chong rolled his eyes. I knew what he was thinking. You'd find an excuse to hit me no matter what I did. If I didn't run, you'd say I wasn't showing you enough respect and hit me anyway. Of course, he only dared to curse me in his head. Your Highness, please stop, the guard beside us stammered. He looked lost, not daring to actually step in. Everyone knew I had once beaten Zhang Sun Chong right in front of the Emperor. I had taken 20 lashes for it back then, but it hadn't stopped me. Move aside, I barked at the guard. He saw me coming and ran. Am I that scary? He deserves this. Zhang Sun Chong looked like he wanted to die. If I weren't a prince and this weren't the Taiji Palace, he probably would have started screaming insults at me. Now, I wasn't some weird sister complex guy, but in my past life, I was an only child who always wanted a younger sister. When I arrived in this world, Lizzie was only 6 years old, the age when little girls are at their cutest. She was quiet, gentle, and always called me third brother with the sweetest smile. After years together, our bond was real. There was a practical reason, too. My birth mother, Consort Yang, was a princess from the previous dynasty. Even though my father, Li Shimin, favored her, she was often marginalized by the other consorts. She was cautious and never complained to the emperor. By staying close to Empress Jiangxuan's daughters, I ensured the empress would look out for my mother. But the main reason I hated this match was Jiangsun Wuji, the boy's father. I had met all 24 officials of the Lingyan Pavilion, and let me tell you, the history books were right. Jiangsun Wuji was a total snake. In actual history, he was the one who eventually had Li Ku killed. If I was going to survive, I couldn't let my father get even more entangled with the Jiangsun family. Plus, in history, Lizzie died at 23. Marrying at 13 played a huge part in that. I had already sabotaged their first engagement back in the 5th year of the Jingguan era. Now she was 15, and I heard my father was getting ideas again. I gave Zhang Sun Chong a final few kicks, making sure he was sufficiently bruised, and then I checked the time. It was time to vanish. If I stayed, the guards would report back and I'd end up getting lashed just to save face for the emperor. If I left now, I'd probably get away with it. I was careful with my strikes. He'd be black and blue for a few days, but nothing was broken. If I hurt him too badly, it would be a provocation to the emperor. This was just a scuffle. As I disappeared around the corner, Zhang Sun Chong climbed to his feet, wincing as he straightened his clothes. He was used to this. Ever since he first annoyed me as a kid, he'd been my favorite punching bag. Young Master Zhang Sun, I've already informed His Majesty, the guard said awkwardly. Let me take you to the imperial physicians. No need. Zhang Sun Chong sighed, waving him off. Let's just go. The guard stared at him, impressed. Is this what happens when you get beaten up so often you become a pro at it? Meanwhile, word reached the Liangyi Hall. When Li Shimin heard that I had intercepted and thrashed Zhang Sun Chong right under the empress's nose, he slammed his hand on the table. That brat. He did it on purpose. Li Shimin roared. Beside him, an official named Chong Ling could only offer a bitter smile. Whether it was on purpose or not, one thing was certain. Since the 2nd year of Jingguan, Zhang Sun Chong hadn't spent a single year without getting beaten by me. It used to be occasional, but once I found out the emperor wanted to marry Chang'e to him, the beatings became a monthly tradition. Your Majesty, Chong Ling whispered. Do you think the Prince of Shu found out about your plans again? Chong Ling stayed silent. He knew when to keep his mouth shut, but he also knew my father needed a sounding board. My father, Li Shimin, rubbed his temples. He was thinking about the marriage again. Back in the 5th year of Jingguan, the dowry should have been ready for my sister, Lizzie. By the 7th year, she was supposed to be officially married off to Zhang Sun Chong. But I had ruined everything. I remembered that day vividly. I was only 14, but I stood my ground in front of the entire court. I told my father that marrying off a girl that young was a death sentence for her health. I even threw his own marriage in his face. I told him that if my mother, the Empress, hadn't married so young, she wouldn't be so frail and sickly today. I told him I wouldn't watch my sister suffer the same fate. My father was livid back then. He ordered 20 strikes from a military staff. Those weren't for show, they were real, bone-shattering blows. My back was a bloody mess, skin torn and flesh raw, but I didn't take back a single word. I looked him in the eye and gave him an ultimatum. If he tried to marry off my sister, he'd either have to kill me, or I'd kill the groom. In the end, Empress Zhongsun herself stepped in. She was moved. Li Lizzie was her own flesh and blood, and she knew I was right. She had married at 13, and her health had been failing ever since. Even Zhongsun Wuji had to back down and plead for mercy, realizing I was only acting out of love for my sister. So, the wedding was delayed. Now it was the 9th year of Jingguan. My father figured 16 was old enough. He actually respected me more after that incident. In a palace defined by the bloody power struggle of the Xuanwu Gate, my fierce, selfless protection of my sister was the one thing that gave him peace of mind. What should I do? Chongling, my father sighed. I can't keep her unmarried forever. No noble family waits this long. Perhaps I could privately feel out the Prince of Shu's thoughts. Chongling suggested. He knew I couldn't stop a royal decree, but I could certainly make life a living hell for anyone involved. If Zhang Sunchong was constantly being beaten into a pulp, how was he supposed to show up for a wedding? Forget it, my father muttered, waving a hand. That brat has already vanished. Go to the Empress's quarters. Find Zhang Sunchong, give him 100 strings of cash for medical expenses, and send the imperial physicians to check on him. While they were stressing out in the main hall, my sister was sitting in the mountain and water pavilion. Li Lizzie was 16 now, a true beauty with eyes like clear pools. Her maid came rushing in, breathless. Princess, it happened again, the maid cried. The Prince of Shu just thrashed young Master Zhongsun right inside the palace. Li Lizzie didn't look shocked. A small, amused smile played on her lips before she forced herself to look worried. Again? Did father catch him? If he gets caught, he'll be punished. The maids giggled. They noticed she didn't ask if her fiancé was okay, only if I was in trouble. I had spent years whispering in her ear, telling her every single bad thing Zhang Sunchong did outside the palace. By now, she couldn't stand the guy, especially with his reputation for frequenting brothels. He got away, princess, the maid whispered, hiding a smile. He timed it perfectly. Li Lizzie exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. Good. As long as he's safe. I was already outside the palace gates by then. My carriage was waiting, and a middle-aged man, one of my top operatives, stepped forward. I signaled him to get inside. What is it? I asked as the door clicked shut. News from the Zhongsun Manor. Highness, he said, his voice low. Zhongsun Wuji is teaming up with the Zheng family of Xingyang. They're planning to target your Yueli trading company. They want to cut off your funding by squeezing our grain supply in the east. I leaned back. The Zheng family. One of the 5 great clans. In this era, these families were so powerful even the emperors struggled to marry into them. Zhongsun Wuji's wife was a daughter of the Zheng clan. They thought they could starve me out. They're also planning to impeach you at the Great Assembly the day after tomorrow, the man added. I let out a cold laugh. My father and his officials thought I was just a brute who used my fists to solve problems. They forgot I'd been here for 8 years. I didn't just spend that time training. I built a commercial empire. Tell the Tianming division to gather everything. I ordered. I want a full list of every business the Zheng family owns. We aren't just going to defend. We're going to crush them. The man looked surprised. I usually stayed hands-off with the day-to-day business, even though Yueli had grown into a monster. Did they really think I was just a thug? I muttered to myself. They think I've done nothing but throw punches for 8 years? It's time to show them what a transmigrator can really do. I wasn't some literary genius like Chu Yuan, but I had one advantage. I was a modern man. I knew things these people couldn't even dream of. When I first arrived in the Great Tang, I knew I needed a loyal following, people who wouldn't just serve me, but would die for me. To build that, I looked back at a legendary, if slightly embarrassing, experience from my past life. Right after high school, I had been tricked by a friend into joining a pyramid scheme. I spent my entire summer break trapped in their brainwashing sessions. But I was smart. I didn't just listen, I studied their methods. Within a month, I became their lead lecturer. By the end of the summer, I had reverse brainwashed the entire group. When I finally called the police, my students told me they'd wait for me to get out of jail so they could work for me. In my first year as Liku, I felt zero security. I decided to use those same psychological tactics to build my own team. Most people in the Tang dynasty were uneducated and deeply superstitious. It was the perfect environment. I predicted the droughts and locust plagues of the second and third years of the Jingguan era with terrifying accuracy. The results shocked even me. Eventually, I didn't even have to do the brainwashing myself. My subordinates took over the training. My trading company, ULI, grew into a hidden monster. I split it into different divisions to keep it organized. I created the Longmen Escort Agency, the first professional logistics and security service in history. I opened a chain of inns called A Certain Inn, which became the largest network of rest stops in the empire. But the real core of my power lay in the western regions and the northern Turkic grasslands. My operatives there, many of them foreigners I had personally re-educated, were fanatically loyal. For 8 years, I hadn't touched a single cent of the company's profits. Every penny went back into expansion. Because of our strict entry rituals and the general lack of information in this era, ULI remained incredibly low profile. People knew I owned a business, of course. You can't run an empire without some royal backing, but nobody realized just how massive it truly was. That's how I got a mole into Zhang Sun Wuji's manor. My people were everywhere, handpicked and perfectly placed. "I'll go gather the files immediately," Tianming said, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and relief. He bowed deeply. "Highness, do you know how we felt these last 8 years? We felt like failures. The company grew, but we never gave you a single coin. Instead, you were always the one sticking your neck out to protect us." I looked at him, surprised by the raw emotion. Most of these men had been untouchables, people living on the brink of starvation before I found them. Now they were well-fed, well-clothed, and living better than most citizens of the Tang. They had been itching for a chance to prove their worth to me. "We've been holding our breath, waiting to serve you," Tianming added. "Everyone is ready." Without waiting for me to respond, he leaped from the carriage, grabbed a horse from a nearby guard, and galloped off to start the mobilization. As the sound of hooves faded, I leaned back and closed my eyes. In my mind, there was a vast, foggy space that had been there since the day I transmigrated. For 8 years, I couldn't see through the mist. But yesterday, it had finally cleared. I realized then what this space was. It was my old workplace from my previous life. I had been an electronic engineer responsible for maintaining equipment at a National Strategic Reserve warehouse. It seemed a massive chunk of that reality had been sliced out and dragged into this world with me, frozen in a void where time stood still. Last night, I had explored the first unlocked area, the office building. It was eerie. The lights didn't work, and the electronic locks were all dead, yet I could see everything perfectly, as if the darkness didn't exist. I had headed straight for the security room used by the armed police. Inside, I found exactly what I needed, a Type 92 pistol and 2 full magazines. The warehouse wasn't a military base. It was for civilian strategic supplies. But because it was a national reserve, it was guarded by a small detachment of armed police. If the fog continued to clear and the entire warehouse complex was inside this space, I was sitting on a gold mine. The National Strategic Reserve contained everything a civilization could ever need. In this world, I used to be a prince who only had his fists. But now, I had an invisible empire at my back and a 9mm equalizer in my hand. Zhang Sun Wuji had no idea what kind of war he was starting. I didn't know exactly what was hidden inside the warehouse. Today, I decided to find out. The office building looked exactly like I remembered, frozen in time. There were no people, no living things. Just me. I realized that no matter how long I stayed in this space, not a single second passed in the real world. I started in the security room where I had been the day before. I found 10 automatic rifles tucked away. They were powerful, but the ammunition was limited. Besides, I didn't need that kind of massive firepower yet. I left the room and began a floor-by-floor sweep of the building. Most of it was boring. It was just offices filled with files and paperwork. Then, I found the freight elevator. It was huge. I noticed something strange on the control panel. This elevator had a button for a fourth basement level. I remembered the other elevators only went down to level 3. Back in my old life, this area had been a restricted zone. I had never been allowed inside. That meant there was something important buried deep underground. I couldn't just jump down the elevator shaft, so I headed for the emergency stairs. I searched the third basement level 3 times before I found it. Tucked away in a dark corner was a security door camouflaged to look like a normal wall. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and found a hidden staircase leading even further down. When I reached the bottom, I froze. A massive arched tunnel, at least 4 meters wide, stretched out into the darkness. I never knew this place existed. Was it a weapons cache? The thought made my blood pump. 40 meters to my left, I saw a heavy vault door. I ran toward it and pulled with everything I had. The door groaned open. I stepped inside and stopped dead. It wasn't what I expected. There were no crates of guns or stacks of gold. There were books, thousands of them. They were organized neatly on steel shelves, stretching back into the gloom. I walked to the nearest rack. The label read, Basic Practical Materials. I reached out and grabbed a book with a strange, vintage red cover. The Barefoot Doctor's Manual, Southern Region Edition. I had never even heard of it. I flipped to the back. It was printed in 1970. I opened the pages and realized exactly what I was holding. This book was written for a time when medical resources were scarce. It didn't focus on complex anatomy or advanced biochemistry. It was purely practical. It listed every common illness a villager might face and gave a direct solution. It had herbal recipes, treatments for chickenpox, and even guides on how to handle a child's fever. It was filled with simple illustrations. If you could read, you could be a doctor. I was stunned. This was a treasure. It didn't aim to make you a master surgeon. It aimed to keep a population alive. Most people in this era didn't die from rare diseases. They died from common infections and basic ailments. This book could save an entire kingdom. I looked around and saw different versions for every province and even versions in minority languages. Next to them, I found another book with a peculiar title, The Friend of Military and Local Talents. I started flipping through the table of contents, and my expression turned weird. The first half was a combat guide. It taught you how to shoot down planes, ambush tanks, identify landmines, and survive a nuclear blast. The second half was a complete 180. It taught you how to grow wheat and corn. It explained how to raise pigs, ducks, and geese. It showed you how to fix a tractor, wire a motor, and even how to caramelize sugar for braised pork. It was absolutely ridiculous. One page discussed how to help a sow ovulate, and the next explained how to build a house or develop photographs. As I looked through it, I felt a lump in my throat. These books were born from a time of intense anxiety. They were written by people who desperately wanted to drag their nation out of poverty and weakness. They wanted to cram every bit of survival knowledge into one place, just in case the world ended. Maybe that was why it was here in the strategic reserve. I found more manuals nearby. Militia training guides, selection of local herbal formulas. To the people of the Tang dynasty, these were divine artifacts. But the real gold was on the next shelf, basic engineering. I found books on primitive methods for making cement. I found guides on how to manufacture glass, paper, and basic textiles. There were even instructions on how to produce industrial chemicals like acid and alkali using the simplest tools possible. The knowledge was laid out in a perfect line. It started with the most basic, manual methods and scaled up to full industrialization. I wasn't just a prince anymore. I was a man holding the blueprint for the future. With these books, I could build an entire industrial civilization from scratch. I stood there, stunned by the sheer weight of this strategic reserve. They had considered every extreme scenario. Even the choice of paper was deliberate. Digital data could store more, but paper was the ultimate backup. It was permanent. It was safe. My heart hammered against my ribs. Looking at these shelves, I felt like I could conquer the world. Who cared if my father, Li Shimin, stripped me of my titles? I didn't need a throne to be powerful. I could become the richest man in Chang'an, and with that kind of wealth, I could live however I wanted. I used to worry that I didn't know the specifics of making soap, refining tea, or weaving high-end cloth. Now, the answers were all right in front of me. If Zhangsun Wuji wanted to play games, let him. It was time for my trading company to show its true teeth. I started sorting through the stacks. I needed a starting point, so I picked out several volumes on spinning and weaving. The books covered everything, from basic manual looms to the Jenny spinner, all the way up to steam-powered industrial frames. I decided to skip the steam engines for now. In the Tang Dynasty, the Jenny spinner alone would be a godsend. Silk and cloth were already our biggest exports. This would turn me into a manufacturing titan. I also grabbed blueprints for flying shuttles and jacquard looms for complex patterns. Food was next. Beyond the livestock manuals, I looked for seeds. I knew these strategic reserves didn't carry the commercial seeds from my old world, the kind that only grow for one season, so you have to buy more. These were heirloom seeds. They could be harvested and replanted year after year without losing their quality. They had crops the Tang Dynasty had never even seen: corn, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. I wasn't ready to introduce those yet, but I could start with scientific breeding for the crops we already had. The warehouse was massive, divided into endless sections. I couldn't see it all in one day, so I headed back toward the main corridor. I found a second door and pushed it open. My jaw dropped again. It was paper, reams and reams of it. But this wasn't ordinary stationery. It was specialized paper for printing currency. There was enough here to print a nation's worth of wealth. It was useless to me for now, but the potential was terrifying. I checked the other unlocked rooms. There were 4 in total. One held specialized ink for banknotes, and another contained disassembled printing equipment. The corridor stretched further into the darkness, but a thick mist blocked the way. It seemed I'd need more time, or more progress, to unlock the rest. I blinked, and the warehouse vanished. I was back in my carriage, the rhythmic clip-clop of horse hooves filling my ears. In my lap sat the books I had taken. I couldn't just hand these to a craftsman, though. The paper was too modern, the printing too perfect, and the text was in simplified Chinese. They wouldn't understand a word. I spent the ride carefully tearing out the technical diagrams and illustrations. The drawings were clear enough that a skilled man could follow them just by looking. I knew the craftsmen of this era were brilliant. Their woodworking skills were legendary. They just needed the right spark. When I arrived back at the Prince of Shu's manor, I summoned my head carpenter, Tian Meng, and his team. 27 men filed in, 3 generations of masters and apprentices. They bowed low, their eyes full of genuine loyalty and admiration. In this world, they didn't just work for me, they belonged to me. Can you understand this? I asked, handing the diagrams for the Jenny spinner to the 3 lead masters. They took the sheets and gasped. They weren't looking at the machine yet, they were feeling the paper. It was white, smooth, and incredibly tough. Then they saw the drawings. The lines were razor-thin and perfectly precise. They had never seen anything like it. "Your Highness," one of the masters whispered, his voice trembling. "Who drew this? This method of drafting, it's genius. It shows every joint, every connection." "That's a secret," I said, leaning back with a smile. "Just know that if you build this, and others like it, you'll be the ones featured in the history books. You might even have your own books published one day." In the Tang Dynasty, writing a book was the highest honor a person could achieve. The 3 masters nearly collapsed. They wanted to kneel and thank me, but they remembered my rule about no kneeling in the manor. "We understand, Highness," the lead master exclaimed. "We can build this. It looks like a spinning machine, though it's far more complex than anything we use." "Exactly," I said. "It's a spinning frame I've been designing. It will increase our spinning efficiency by 16 times. The room went dead silent. 16 times? They looked at the paper, then back at me, their faces pale with shock. I just smiled. The revolution had officially begun. These master carpenters knew exactly what a spinning machine was. Most spinning machines in the Great Tang were made of wood, and they were primitive. A single worker could only spin 1 thread at a time. Large-scale workshops were rare. Most thread was spun by commoners in their own homes and sold to merchants later. Even in the biggest workshops, it was still 1 person per thread. But my improved design, based on the Jenny spinner, changed everything. 1 person could spin 16 threads at once. In an era where silk and cloth were used as actual currency, this wasn't just a machine. It was a money printer. If I had better materials, like precision-ground iron gears and rotors, I could make a machine that spun hundreds of threads. But for now, what would have to do? Even with the friction of wooden rollers, this design would crush the competition. 16 times. Tianming whispered, his eyes distant. He understood the math. Our production costs would drop to a 16th of our competitors. Actually, it would be even lower. 16 people spinning 16 threads costs 16 times more in wages than one person doing the same work. When you factored in the savings on workshop space and equipment, the profit margins were staggering. How much capital does the Welai merchant house have right now? I asked, turning to Tianming. I hadn't taken a single cent from the business in years. I knew they had been stockpiling wealth, waiting for the day I finally needed it. We have 80,000 guan, Tianming said, his chest swelling with pride. 80,000 silver strings. It sounded like a lot, but it was even more impressive when you realized ULI was also funding my private intelligence network. I had taught them that business was like war. Information was everything. We had spies planted in every major merchant house in the city. Their loyalty was absolute, and their funding came straight from our coffers. On top of that, we spent heavily on disaster relief and orphanages in my name. The fools in the capital thought I was just a brute like the Duke of Su, but they had no idea how deep my roots reached. How many Eugenians do we have in Chang'an? I asked. Following your instructions, Highness, we have 3 flagship locations in the best spots: the East Market, the West Market, and Shanha Ward, Tianming replied, bowing. We also have 7 smaller inns scattered around the outer city. I nodded. The East and West markets were the heart of Chang'an's trade. The city was a perfect grid, 108 wards laid out so precisely I suspected the architect had been a perfectionist. The emperor's palace sat at the north, with the imperial city just south of it where the officials worked. The main axis, Zhuke Avenue, split the city perfectly in half. The Shanha Ward was prime real estate, right south of the Zhuke Gate. I only managed to buy that land because of my status as a prince. I remembered negotiating with Zhang Sun Chong for that specific property. I had to beat a lot of sense into him before he agreed to sell it to me. Are those 3 inns set up according to my requirements? Yes, Highness. We bought the inns and every surrounding shop we could get our hands on. Our 3 locations are currently the largest plots in their respective districts. Good, I said. Those would be my flagship stores. Withdraw the entire 80,000 guan. Give 10,000 to Master Lu Daqiang immediately. I want these spinning machines built as fast as possible. I have looms and jacquard machines for you to build next, so don't waste time. If you need more men, Tianming will find them. Tianming looked like he was about to cry. Highness, it's been 8 years. You're finally willing to spend the money. Master Lu Daqiang was shaking with excitement. He couldn't believe I remembered his name. Highness, 10,000 is too much. It's just a spinning machine. We don't need that much. You do, I countered. Because you aren't just building one. You're building a factory. I want mass production. I don't care what industries the Zheng and Zhangsun families think they own. Silk and cloth are their lifeblood. I'm going to take it all. Lu Daqiang hesitated. If we produce on that scale, we'll need an army of master carpenters. Ordinary apprentices don't have the skill to build these parts yet. You won't need them, I said, waving him off. We're going to use an assembly line. An assembly line? Lu Daqiang asked, confused. Think of it like mold-based production, I explained. But for assembly, every person is responsible for only one specific part. Then, we put them all together. Lu Daqiang's eyes lit up. He instantly grasped the concept. You mean, one group only makes the rollers, another only makes the frame, and a final group joins them? Exactly, I smiled. People think ancient people were simple, but the concept of standardized parts had been used since the Qin dynasty. By having apprentices repeat the same simple task, they would become experts in days. The parts would flow to a central assembly room, and the machines would practically build themselves. It was time to show this era what real industry looked like. I explained the process to Lu Daqiang in detail. Once the workers got used to it, every part would be standardized. If a piece broke later on, you could just swap it out with a spare from another machine. Standardized production wasn't entirely new, The Qin dynasty had used it for weapons, and the imperial workshops of the Great Tang did something similar. But for civilian craftsmen, this was unheard of. Ancient artisans lived and died by their individual reputations. They usually built every single piece of a product themselves because they didn't trust anyone else's quality. If a chair collapsed because of a bad joint made by an apprentice, it was the master's name in the dirt. But working for me was different. I wasn't looking for individual masterpieces. I wanted an industrial revolution. Lu Daqiang's eyes widened as the realization hit him. This was more than just modular building. It was a leap in efficiency. He also realized something else: security. Even if someone tried to steal our secrets, no single worker would know how to build the entire machine. They only knew their own specific part. I understand, Your Highness, Lu Daqiang said, bowing deeply. I turned to Tianming. Once the prototypes are finished, move the textile staff in for trial production immediately. Also, start preparing to buy up all the raw hemp and silk you can find. I paused, thinking about the future. And tell our Western region branches to start collecting as many white butterfly seeds as possible. We need large-scale plantations. White butterfly was just the old name for cotton. It had been introduced to the Tang, but it was mostly grown in small amounts in border states like Gaochang and Shache. Those areas would eventually become the famous cotton hubs of Xinjiang, but right now, the Tang heartland hadn't realized its value yet. Understood, Tianming replied. If we have to, use our initial profits to buy cotton from Gaochang at high prices, I added. I want their farmers to realize that growing cotton pays better than growing grain. In fact, I want them to stop growing food entirely and plant nothing but cotton. We'll buy grain from nearby regions and sell it back to them at fair prices. Tianming looked confused. Your Highness, what is the goal of this? I didn't explain. He wouldn't understand the concept of an economic trap. It would take 3 years to see the results, but eventually, I'd have Gaochang's entire economy in a chokehold. They were always a troublesome neighbor for my father, the emperor, but for me, they were just a market to be dominated. Just do it, I said. And from now on, we call it cotton, not white butterfly. Yes, Highness. I handed another set of blueprints to Lu Daqiang. This is a flying shuttle loom. Once the spinning machines are verified, start mass-producing these too. By the time the spring silkworms are ready this year, we're going to take over the entire fabric industry. I wasn't done yet. Find someone to help me transcribe some documents. I'll dictate, and they'll write. Once that's done, I want a massive expansion in pig farming. Start buying up all the animal and vegetable oils you can find. The books I had brought with me covered everything: spinning, weaving, jacquard looms, and even soap making. I even included instructions for pan-frying tea. I had been drinking pan-fried tea for years because I couldn't stand the Tang style of tea soup, which involved boiling tea leaves with salt, ginger, and orange peel. It was disgusting. I had figured out the basics of frying tea through trial and error long ago, but having the professional methods from my books would make it even better. Highness, Tianming hesitated, not many people eat pork. The commoners don't like raising pigs because the meat is considered low class. Most people prefer mutton. I snorted. In the Tang dynasty, pork was seen as dirty meat for the poor. Just raise them. Trust me, pork is 100 times better than mutton if you cook it right. Every part of a pig is a treasure. It's the greatest invention for human survival. As you wish. I waved him off. I had blueprints for cement and other materials too, but there was no rush. Money came first. Get a few people to my study. We need to start copying. I was about to head in to dictate a few books, including one on how to encourage sows to breed more efficiently, when a guard came sprinting into the courtyard. Report. Your Highness, the Empress has issued an order. You are to report to the palace immediately. I froze. Empress Zhongsun? Was she going to scold me for beating up Zhang Sunchong? It seemed unlikely. I'd been thumping that guy for years, and she had never stepped in before. Where is the messenger? I asked. The guard gave a strained smile. He left, Highness. The messenger had delivered the word and bolted. He knew my reputation. In my manner, even imperial messengers didn't hang around for tips. They just wanted to escape with their lives. What? Am I that scary? I shouted. Go bring him back. He was on a horse, Highness. He's long gone. I cursed under my breath. I should have told the guards to detain any messengers. I wanted to fish for information to see if my cheap father, Emperor Li Shimin, was using the Empress as a front to lure me into a trap. My father had no shame when it came to tricking me into a beating. I had ignored his summons before by pretending I never received them, but I couldn't ignore the Empress. Over the years, I had grown to genuinely respect her. She was every bit the virtuous Empress history claimed she was. Even though I treated her brother's family like punching bags, she had always been kind and graceful toward me. I couldn't say no to her. I could tell the Empress wasn't acting. I could feel her sincerity. In most matters, she treated everyone fairly, and she had stepped in many times to save me from my father's military cane. Still, I wasn't taking any chances. To avoid a beating, I strapped several thick pads under my clothes before mounting my horse and heading to the palace. In the outer city of Chang'an, the streets were too crowded for a gallop, but inside the palace walls, it was different. There were dedicated paths for officials on urgent business. I rode past the Taiji Hall and spotted a group of maidservants waiting for me. The one in the lead was the Empress's personal attendant. "Your Highness, the Empress is waiting for you," she said, stealing a quick glance at me. She probably knew I had just thrashed Zhang Sunchong again. Word traveled fast in the palace. "Where is she?" I asked, trying to gauge if my father was around. "The Lijing Palace," she replied. I breathed a sigh of relief. At this hour, Li Shimin was usually buried in paperwork, not lounging in his wife's quarters. I followed her quickly, feeling much more relaxed. When I reached the doors, the guards opened them immediately. I didn't even wait to step inside before I started shouting, "Mother, I'm here." I always showed the Empress respect. I was actually the one who started calling her mother instead of the formal titles used in the Tang dynasty. It was a habit from my previous life. At first, she and my father were surprised, but they never corrected me. Soon, the other princes and princesses started following my lead. I stepped through the doorway, but the moment I saw a familiar figure standing there, I froze. My instincts kicked in. I spun on my heel before anyone could say a word. "Mother, I just remembered I have a gift for you. Let me go back and get it," I shouted, already sprinting for the exit. Damn it, why was Li Shimin here today? I heard a sudden burst of laughter from the Empress. She couldn't hold it back. "Get your ass back here," Li Shimin roared. "Oh, Mother, I think I hear Father calling me from somewhere else. I better go find him," I yelled over my shoulder, not slowing down. "If you walk out that door, I'm marrying Lizzie off tomorrow," Li Shimin sneered. I stopped dead. My hand was practically on the doorframe, but I didn't move. I slowly turned around, my face a mask of fake innocence. "Oh, Father. You're here? I thought you were somewhere else." That's when I noticed Zhang Sunchong was still there too. He was standing in a corner, silent, sporting a pair of fresh black eyes. The Empress was beaming at me. She loved this. None of the other imperial children acted like this around them. "All right, Kur, come inside," she said warmly. "I promise your father won't hit you today. You should have said so sooner, Mother." I relaxed instantly and gave my father a casual wave. "Hey, Dad, you're here too." Li Shimin's pulse was visibly throbbing in his temple. He looked like he was 1 second away from exploding. Beside him, Zhang Sunchong's jaw dropped. He looked at me like I was a madman. I realized then that he had probably never seen anyone talk to the Emperor this way. His world was being rocked. He probably felt a lot better about his black eyes now. If I wasn't afraid of the Emperor, beating him was just a hobby. "Kur, speak properly." The Empress giggled, hiding her smile behind her sleeve. "If you keep this up, even I won't be able to hold your father back." "Mother, why did you call for me?" "Just say the word, and I'll get it done," I said, getting straight to business. "It's nothing major," she said softly. "Your father and I were discussing Lizzie's marriage. We wanted to hear your opinion." I blinked. The great dictator Li Shimin actually wanted my advice? That was new. Usually, he just barked orders. "Well, Mother, they say an elder brother is like a father," I began, shifting into full salesman mode. Even though I'm not her oldest brother, I care for her deeply. For a girl like Lizzie, her husband must be a hero, a man of supreme literary and martial talent. I'm not saying he has to be exactly like the great generals of old, but he should at least come close. Li Shimin's lip twitched. I knew what he was thinking. Asterisk if any official heard this. they'd spit in your face. Where am I supposed to find a man like that? Asterisk. The Empress just kept smiling. She didn't care if I was exaggerating. She liked that I was looking out for her daughter. Zhang Sun Chong, meanwhile, stared at the floor, probably cursing me in his head. And look at our Lizzie, I continued, ignoring my father's annoyed expression. She's a masterpiece. She has the spirit of the moon, the grace of a willow, and a heart made of poetry. Honestly, she belongs among the 4 greatest beauties of history. Shut up, Li Shimin finally snapped. You claim to be unlearned, yet you spout these flowery descriptions? And who is this Diaochan you keep mentioning? That was a title for a palace official in the Han Dynasty, not a person's name. Oh, is that so? I paused for a second, but I didn't back down. My face was thicker than the walls of Chang'an. In the book I'm writing, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Diaochan is the name of the most beautiful woman in the world. If I say it's a name, it's a name. You? Writing a book? Li Shimin looked me up and down with utter disdain. Have you no shame? How did I father a son like you? Why couldn't I write a book? I challenged. I didn't care about the real author, Luo Guanzhou. He wasn't born yet. If he saw my version hundreds of years from now, he'd probably just call me a genius. Fine, I didn't bring you here to listen to your nonsense. Li Shimin sighed, rubbing his forehead. I'm here to talk about Lizzie's wedding. You previously argued she was too young and that marriage would hurt her health. Well, she's 15 now. It's time to start the preparations. She'll be 16 by the time she marries next year. My father, Li Shimin, said firmly. That's not young anymore. I'm warning you. This is the limit of my patience. He glared at me, his eyes sharp. I knew why he was acting so tough. He was terrified I'd humiliate him right here in front of everyone. Father, I started, not missing a beat. You call this a discussion? You've already made the decision. Why even bring me here? Inside, I was rolling my eyes. He only called me here to give me a chance to back down gracefully. If he didn't want my input, he wouldn't have bothered. I had to stop this marriage. I couldn't use the genetics argument, though. In the Tang Dynasty, marrying your cousin was normal. People didn't care about DNA. They cared about tradition and power. Who was I to challenge thousands of years of custom? Just a 17-year-old prince. They'd laugh me out of the palace. Even the great noble families married within their own circles to keep their bloodlines pure. I also couldn't talk about the high infant mortality rates of cousin marriage. In this era, kids died from everything: famine, cold, simple infections. The rate of birth defects was a drop in the bucket compared to the common tragedies of the time. Plus, people were superstitious. Sometimes a deformity was seen as a divine omen. Logic wouldn't work here. I needed a different angle. Zhang Sun Chong is right here, my father said, snapping me out of my thoughts. Tell him your requirements. Once Lizzie marries him, you are forbidden from laying a finger on him. I glanced at Zhang Sun Chong. He looked like a kicked puppy. Father, with all due respect, talking to him is useless. We should be talking to his father. In our world, it's the command of the parents and the words of the matchmaker. He doesn't have a say in this. My father's blood pressure visibly spiked. Oh, now you care about the command of parents? A few years ago, when you were ruining the engagement party, what did you say? Life is precious, but love is worth more. Where was your respect for tradition then? He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Enough nonsense. Give him your conditions. If he meets them, you stop the harassment. Period. Fine, I said, leaning back with a smirk. My requirements are simple. He just has to be able to beat me in a fight. Zhang Sun Chong's face went pale. I could almost hear him screaming inside. Asterisk, if I could beat you, I would have done it years ago. Do you think I enjoy being your punching bag every month? Asterisk. Be serious, my father roared. All right, I shouted back, unbothered. How about a duel? Martial arts or close quarters combat? If he's better than me, he can have her. My father looked like he was about to explode. If Zhang Sun Chong wasn't standing there, the emperor probably would have started swearing at me. What is the difference between that and a fight? He's a scholar, not a general. Don't glare at me, father, I said, my voice turning smooth and academic. A gentleman must master the 6 arts: rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics. Everyone calls me a brute, so surely it's fair to ask that my future brother-in-law be at least as skilled as I am in these 6 areas? Is that too much to ask for a man marrying a princess? The room went silent. My father, the empress, and Zhang Sunchong all shared the same stunned expression. The 6 arts were the gold standard for scholars, but very few people actually mastered all of them. But as they looked at me, they realized something terrifying. Despite my reputation as a hooligan, I actually excelled at them. Zhang Sunchong might be okay at music and calligraphy, but he couldn't touch me in archery or charioteering. In mathematics, my father knew my skills in calculation were light years ahead of anyone in the empire. What's wrong? I asked, looking sideways at Zhang Sunchong with a mocking grin. Can't even do that. My father was stuck. He couldn't say my request was unreasonable. These were the teachings of Confucius himself. To disagree would be to insult the foundation of their entire education system. Zhang Sunchong took a deep breath. He realized if he stayed silent, the wedding was as good as dead. He didn't actually want to marry a princess. It would kill his political career since he'd be tied to the inner court, but he was the eldest son of the Zhangsun family. He had a duty. He stepped forward and bowed deeply to me. Your Majesty, I have not mastered the arts. The Prince of Shu is a dragon among men, and I cannot compare. However, I beg the prince to give me a chance to prove my worthiness to the princess. You're probably cursing me in your head right now, I said coldly. Cut the flowery talk. I don't like you, and you don't have to like me. You can even hate me. I don't care. I wouldn't dare, he replied, his head still bowed. I beg for a chance. My father and mother watched in silence. They knew that to get Lizzie married, they had to go through me. They couldn't just kill me. I was a prince. And they couldn't ignore me because I'd just make life a living hell for everyone involved. I looked at Zhang Sunchong, still bowing low. He had that classic Zhang Sun trait, patience. He was like a snake waiting in the grass. I knew I couldn't just keep hitting him forever. If my father was truly determined, he'd force the marriage eventually. I needed a real solution. Fine, I said, my voice suddenly serious. Since the Emperor and Empress are both here, I won't make it impossible for you. My father and the Empress both perked up. When I used their official titles, it meant I was done playing games. I was a jerk, but I was a man of my word. Speak, Your Highness, Zhang Sunchong said, his voice trembling slightly. I looked him up and down, a cold smirk playing on my lips. Maybe my standards were too high before. But there's one thing I won't compromise on. If my sister marries you, she can't live a life of hardship. Her lifestyle cannot drop. So, I have one condition. If you can't meet it, you must take the initiative to cancel the engagement yourself. Do you dare to agree? My father, Li Shimin, paused. I could see the suspicion in his eyes. He knew me well enough to know I was likely digging a hole for someone. But until I named the price, he couldn't be sure. Zhang Sunchong hesitated. I cannot decide such a major matter on my own. I didn't press him. Instead, I turned to my father and Empress Zhang Sun, offering a formal bow before continuing. My condition is perfectly reasonable. If Zhang Sunchong, or rather the Zhang Sun family, cannot meet it, the engagement is off. I don't expect an answer now. He can go back and discuss it with his father, the Duke of Qi. Tell us the condition first, my father said, his voice cautious. It's simple, I said, holding up a single finger. Father, since I grew up, you haven't given me much besides my monthly allowance. In fact, you find me more than you've rewarded me. So here's the deal. I'm giving the Zhang Sun family 1 year. In 1 year, the betrothal gifts they bring for my sister cannot be worth less than the dowry I provide for her. I paused for effect, my gaze sharpening. And remember, I'm talking about the dowry from me, Li Ku. It has nothing to do with what the emperor provides. I spoke with absolute finality. On the surface, it sounded like a joke. Everyone knew that despite being a prince, I was broke. My father rarely rewarded me because I spent half my time making him angry. Most of my money went toward maintaining my staff and my own royal lifestyle. By the time the bills were paid, there was barely anything left. In their eyes, my dowry would be a few symbolic gifts at best. The Zhang Sun family, on the other hand, was loaded. They had years of imperial rewards, deep connections with other powerful clans, and monopolies on some of the most profitable industries in the Tang dynasty. To them, matching a poor prince's gift should have been child's play. Zhang Sunchong stared at me, stunned. I could see the thought crossing his mind. That's it? After years of being bullied and braced for some impossible, sadistic challenge, he couldn't believe his luck. He almost agreed on the spot, but he managed to bite his tongue. He needed his father's approval first. So, Zhang Sun Chong, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Are you a man? Surely a man wouldn't let his future wife live in poverty because he couldn't provide for her? You wouldn't be that pathetic, would you? My father rolled his eyes. He knew my serious persona never lasted long. Father, mother, I urged, ignoring his look. Do you agree? I need your word, or this doesn't count. Marriage is not a game. Kaur, my father said, his face hardening. This is my condition, I snapped, letting my stubborn streak show. If they can't even do this, how can she be happy? If you don't agree, I can't guarantee what I'll do next. Zhang Sunchong looked like he was about to explode. Hardship? The eldest daughter of the emperor marrying the eldest son of the Duke of Qi? The idea of her living in poverty was absurd. Kaur, I know you want what's best for Lizzie. The empress interrupted softly. She knew that if I decided to be a problem, no amount of beatings or house arrests would stop me. If the Zhang Sun family meets your condition, do you promise to stop interfering? If they fail, they cancel the engagement voluntarily, I replied firmly. If they succeed, I give you my word. I will stop. Fine, my father said, taking a deep breath. Zhang Sun Chong, go home. Tell your father what Li Ku said. He's a brat, but he keeps his word. Besides, your family shouldn't have trouble outdoing whatever dowry he manages to scrape together. If your father agrees, so do I. Yes, your majesty. I'll go at once, Zhang Sun Chong said, bowing low. Wait, my father called out, looking at me. If the Duke agrees, you are not allowed to cause trouble for Zhang Sun Chong for the next year. If you touch him, the deal is void. I nodded easily. As long as he doesn't provoke me, I won't touch him. After all, if he meets the condition, he'll be my brother-in-law. I have to think of my sister's future. Zhang Sun Chong hurried out, looking like he'd just won the lottery. I bowed to my parents, a hidden glint in my eyes. Then I'll take my leave too. I need to start making money for that dowry. Just get out of here, my father grumbled, and stay out of trouble. As I walked away, I felt my father's gaze lingering on my back. He knew I was digging a pit, but he couldn't see the bottom of it. He thought he knew my finances. He thought he knew my limits. He was wrong. I wasn't just a prince. I was a man who knew the future. And by the time this year was over, the Zhang Sun family wouldn't just be poor, they'd be ruined. Empress Zhang Sun smiled and gently patted my father's hand. I didn't stay to watch their affection. I turned and walked out of the Lijing Hall, my mind already spinning with plans. I hadn't gone far when I spotted a tiny figure waiting by the roadside. As soon as she saw me, she scrambled toward me as fast as her little legs could carry her. Third brother, she called out in a milky, high-pitched voice. My heart melted instantly. It was Jinyang, my youngest sister. I'd watched her grow up since she was a baby. She was only 3 years old, barely past her second birthday really, and she still struggled to pronounce her words clearly. Oh, little CZ, why are you out here? I asked, a wide grin breaking across my face. Waiting for third brother, she chirped, reaching for me. Big sister cried. So I came to find you. I paused, my smile faltering. Which big sister? Third brother. Another sweet voice called out from the side. I looked up to see Qingyang, who was about 5 or 6 years old. Seeing her, I knew exactly who was crying. If Qingyang was here, the one missing was Changle. Qingyang, come here, I said, waving her over. She ran to me at once. Their maid stayed a respectful distance away, knowing better than to interrupt. They knew that in the hearts of these princesses, I ranked far higher than their eldest brother or their fourth brother. Tell me, I whispered, looking at Qingyang. Did big sister hear me talking to father and mother? Yes, Jinyang answered for her, surprisingly clear for once. When that bad man came, mother called big sister over. She wouldn't let us listen, but big sister looked sad when she came out. Then when you arrived, we were hiding in the back. Trust me, I said, picking Jinyang up and taking Qingyang's hand. Let's go find her. We walked to the small garden behind the hall. There, sitting by herself and wiping away tears, was Changle. Let me see. Who is this little kitten crying over here? I asked playfully as I approached. Changle didn't hide. She turned her tear-filled eyes toward me. and the moment she saw my face, she broke. The tears she'd been trying to hold back flooded out. Before I could say another word, she lunged forward and buried her face in my chest, sobbing uncontrollably. I froze for a second. Changel was growing up. In the Tang dynasty, girls her age were already being taught about the boundaries between men and women. Even as siblings, we hadn't hugged like this since she was 10. Her maids stood in the background, their mouths hanging open in shock. Third brother, do I really have to marry Zhang Sun Chong? She sobbed into my robes. I don't want to. I don't want to marry him. I felt a pang of guilt. I had spent years telling her every bad thing Zhang Sun Chong had ever done. To her, he wasn't a noble suitor, he was a villain. Every young girl dreams of a hero, a man who stands tall like the legends I told her about. Zhang Sun Chong was the opposite of that dream. Don't worry, I whispered, my voice cold and steady. You won't have to marry him. She pulled back, looking up at me with a glimmer of hope. Really? You heard what I said in there, didn't you? I asked, wiping a tear from her cheek. She nodded sheepishly. Yes. Then trust me. If they agree to the bet, I will prepare a dowry for you in 1 year that no one in the world can match. If they accept the challenge, they've already lost. But they are the Zhang Sun family, Changel whispered, her face full of worry. Third brother, you don't have any money. I can give you all the savings I've kept in my room. I laughed, reaching out to ruffle her hair. Who told you I was poor? I was just pretending. But sixth brother said you were broke. He said you even tried to borrow money from him. I arched an eyebrow. Liyin told you that. No, I mean it's just. She got flustered, her tongue tripping over her words as she tried to cover for him. I get it, I said with a smirk. Listen to me. I have plenty of money. And don't you dare lend a single cent to your sixth brother. I'm ignoring him on purpose to teach him a lesson. If he asks you again, tell him you gave all your money to me. Changel nodded obediently. In a few days, I'll show you the first thing I've made, I promised. It's going to make us more gold than you can imagine. What is it? She asked, curiosity finally replacing her sadness. It's a secret for now. You'll see soon enough. She didn't push. She was never the type to argue. Okay, third brother. Just be a happy princess, I said seriously. Leave the rest to me. I stayed a bit longer, chatting with all three of them before I had to leave. I reminded Changel to take the younger ones out for walks, but warned her to keep Jinyang away from the heavy pollen in the gardens. As I walked away, a heavy thought settled in my chest. In history, Changel and Jinyang both died young. Changel's death might have been caused by marrying and giving birth too early. Empress Zhangsun herself would die at 36, likely exhausted from having 7 children in such a short span of time. Then there was the hereditary illness of the Li family. People said it was like high blood pressure. My eldest brother, Li Chengxian, was already showing signs. History says he became a cripple after falling off a horse, but I had my doubts. I'd looked into his symptoms. A simple fall doesn't turn a man into a permanent invalid unless something else is wrong. I suspected it was diabetic foot, a slow, rotting agony that would explain why he eventually lost his mind and turned to rebellion. I looked back at my sisters playing in the distance. I wasn't just here to stop a marriage. I was here to change their fates entirely. And to do that, I needed power, money, and a plan that no one, not even the emperor, could stop. According to the history books I remembered, Li Chengqian's condition would only get worse. Eventually, he wouldn't even be able to walk. If it were just a simple fracture from a fall, it would heal. A limp doesn't just spontaneously deteriorate into total paralysis unless there's an underlying disease. I suspected he had Xiaoku disease, what we call diabetes. I never asked him about it directly. I wasn't a doctor, and showing too much medical knowledge would only spark suspicion. I didn't want to get dragged into that mess. My sister Jinyang was a different story. She seemed to have inherited Empress Zhangsuan's weak lungs. It looked like congenital asthma. It wasn't severe yet, but the ancient treatments for it were all wrong. When she got sick, the imperial doctors would lock her in a room with no ventilation, fearing she'd catch a cold. For an asthmatic, that was a death sentence. I had been quietly forcing changes in her daily habits, but honestly, I didn't know if it would be enough to save her. I left the palace and headed back to my estate. I immediately summoned Tian Ming. After a moment of thought, I handed him a set of instructions. It was the method for making glass. It was a simple process, really, but beyond the comprehension of anyone in this era. I also gave him the designs for a high-temperature furnace. The technical requirements were steep, but with the current craftsmanship available, it was doable. Back in the Lijing Hall, the Empress lay on her couch while my father, Li Shimin, sat beside her. Two maids stood before them, reporting my every word. "Is that everything?" my father asked. "Yes, Your Majesty." The Prince of Shu said exactly that. The maid replied respectfully. My father raised an eyebrow. "That brat. He really does care for his sisters. But I can't help but feel there's a trap here." The Empress smiled gently. "Since you've already agreed, don't overthink it. Besides, Kuer is right. The Zhangsun family can't afford to let their dowry look pathetic compared to a prince's gift. It shouldn't exceed yours, of course, but it shouldn't be less than Kuer's either." She had been married to my father since she was 13. She knew exactly where her loyalties lay. Even though the Zhangsuns were her birth family, she was a Li now. If her brother's family messed up, she wouldn't protect them. "I just hope the boy stops causing trouble," my father grumbled. "By the way, how is Jinyang's health?" "Much better," the Empress said, her eyes brightening. Kuer was right about a few things. Since he insisted on more ventilation, daily exercise, and keeping her away from the flower gardens, she's improved significantly. She's even put on some weight. "Is that his skill?" "That's Sun Simiao's skill," my father snorted, referring to the legendary physician. The Empress just smiled and stayed silent. I had claimed the advice came from Sun Simiao, but she was clever. She knew that if you looked through the old medical texts, you wouldn't find these specific methods. She realized I had talent. I was just hiding it. Meanwhile, Zhang Sun Chong had scrambled home as fast as his legs could carry him. His father, Zhang Sun Wuji, was waiting in the study. "He hit you again?" Wuji's face darkened as he looked at his son's bruised eye. On the surface, Wuji always smiled at me in court. But inside, he was fuming. I treated his son like a punching bag, and to a man of his status, that was a slap in the face to the entire Zhangsun clan. He was just waiting for the right moment to strike a lethal blow. "It's fine. I'm used to it," Zhang Sun Chong said with a cold sneer. "He can act tough for now. When the crown prince takes the throne, I'll make him pay. Watch your tongue." Wuji snapped. He took a breath and looked at his son. "What do you think of his proposal?" "I'll follow your lead, father." Wuji slammed his hand on the desk. "This is why he calls you spineless. You need to think for yourself." "I think we should agree," Chong said quickly. "We have to." Wuji agreed, his voice cold. "He's humiliated us for years. If we back down from a challenge like this, we'll lose all face in court. As for his wealth, he thinks we don't know about his ULI merchant group. I've already had your mother's family investigate. They buy low and sell high, but they don't own the sources. If I cut off their supply lines, his little empire collapses in a day." Wuji leaned back, a predatory glint in his eyes. "He's gone too far lately. I'll impeach him at the next assembly. Tomorrow, I will formally accept his bet. But listen to me. He will try to provoke you again this year. Do not give him any leverage." After his son left, Wuji sat in the silence of his study, plotting. He had to destroy my image in the emperor's eyes. His motivation was simple. The crown prince, Li Chengxian, was sick. His diabetes was getting worse. Wuji had checked the records. People with this wasting thirst didn't live long. The emperor was in his prime. He might live another 20 years. By then, what state would Chengxian be in? His legs were already failing him. My father had even whispered to Wuji about the possibility of making me the crown prince instead. Since the second prince died young, I was technically next in line if Chengxian was skipped. Wuji had spent years whispering in the emperor's ear, insisting that the throne must stay with the empress's direct bloodline. That was why he was pushing for the other brother, Li Tai. To Zhangsun Wuji, I wasn't just a bully, I was a threat to his family's entire future. To Zhangsun Wuji, the specific identity of the crown prince didn't matter, as long as they were born from Empress Zhangsun. Whoever sat on that throne, Wuji would remain the esteemed uncle of the state. He knew my father, Li Shimin, better than anyone. The fact that my father had privately mentioned making me the crown prince, without anyone else prompting him, meant I held a significant place in the emperor's heart. Wuji had talked him out of it for now, but he knew that wasn't a permanent fix. He decided I had to be dealt with. He couldn't kill me, of course, but he could ruin me. If he piled enough stains on my reputation, The other officials would never accept me as a ruler. This was exactly why he had tolerated me bullying his son for all these years. Being the top-ranked official in the Lingyan Pavilion, and the Duke of Qi came with a heavy burden of patience and schemes. I didn't know the full extent of their private conversations. I was a transmigrator, not an omniscient god. After setting my own plans in motion, I waited for the results. Over the last 8 years, I hadn't just been a bully. I had built a solid foundation. I had the people, the channels, and the resources to do whatever I needed. I spent my evening reading a book on political science I'd pulled from my storage space. It was a text I'd never touched in my past life, but here, I felt it was essential. In the modern world, politics were often sanitized, but I knew the raw reality of power was far grittier. The next morning, I woke up early. I went through a workout routine I designed myself, blending modern fitness with Tang Dynasty military combat techniques. Once I finished, I rushed to the palace. It was the day of the Imperial Assembly. Unlike later dynasties, the Tang court met every 5 days. Since I held an official title, even though I hadn't formally taken office, I was required to attend. My intelligence from the Yuelai merchant group told me the old fox, Zhangsun Wuji, was going to impeach me today. I wondered what pathetic excuse he'd found this time. Ever since I started attending court, he had pecked at me constantly. Usually, it was over trivial matters, but in the imperial family, no matter is truly small. These officials could twist a minor scuffle into a threat to national security. It was exhausting. Was he really this bitter just because I'd thrashed his son a few times? The assembly began as usual. We greeted my father, and he granted us all seats. The chairs were actually my invention. The older officials with bad knees couldn't handle the traditional kneeling posture anymore. The Tang dynasty was much more open-minded about these things than the eras that followed. Once my father invited everyone to speak, Zhangsun Wuji stepped forward immediately. "Your Majesty, I wish to impeach the third prince, the Prince of Shu," he announced loudly. The other officials didn't even blink. They were used to this. For years, Wuji had been picking fights with me every other week. Most of his complaints were technically true, but they were incredibly petty, mostly critiques of my personal character. Some people even joked that Wuji had been possessed by the spirit of Wei Zheng, the legendary imperial censor. But Wei Zheng's job was to criticize the emperor. Wuji had no such excuse. I impeached the Prince of Shu for being obsessed with trivialities and lacking any ambition, Wuji shouted, his face a mask of cold righteousness. He neglects his duties and damages the virtue of the imperial family. He acts recklessly within the palace, assaulting others without provocation. Instead of serving as a role model or sharing your Majesty's burdens, he spends his days gambling and frequenting brothels. He is a disgrace to the Imperial Majesty. He took a breath and looked directly at my father. I request that the Prince of Shu be grounded for a year to reflect on his actions and study properly. On the other side of the room, Cheng Yaojin rolled his eyes. He leaned against the armrest of his chair and looked like he was about to take a nap. He was clearly bored. I rolled my eyes too. Seriously? Could this man not find a single new piece of material? My informants told me he was coming for me, and I expected something substantial. Instead, it was the same old script. "I have something to say," I said, standing up and speaking clearly. My father waved a hand, looking tired. "Speak." This was a routine he was forced to endure. "Duke of Qi, are you ever going to give it a rest?" I asked, looking Wuji in the eye. "Can't you switch it up? You've used the same excuses for years. Don't you get tired of it?" The military generals in the room suddenly snapped their eyes open. Usually, when Wuji impeached me, I'd argue my way out of it by twisting words to avoid being grounded. Today, I was meeting him head-on. Cheng Yaojin actually sat up straight, looking interested. "How dare you talk back?" Wuji countered instantly. "The fact that I have had to impeach you for the same problems for years proves you have no intention of changing. It only confirms that you need to be confined so you can focus on your studies." He was good. He'd caught my slip of the tongue and turned it against me. The generals shook their heads, thinking I'd been outmaneuvered by the old fox again. But I wasn't done. Why wouldn't I talk back? "Everything you say is nonsense. I've put up with you for years, but today, I'm done being patient. Let me ask you something. I'm not the crown prince, so of course I should be obsessed with trivialities. If I were ambitious and diligent, which crown prince in history would feel safe? My eldest brother is sitting right here, so I'll be blunt. I turned to the rest of the court. It's not that I haven't read the books of war. The Duke of Wei is here. Ask him. He knows if I understand military strategy or not. If I decided to be ambitious and take command of the Tang armies, would my brother even be able to sleep at night? I let the words fly, one after another, like a barrage of arrows. The silence that followed was deafening. Several ministers actually choked on their own spit, their faces turning bright red. Li Jing, the god of war himself, widened his eyes in pure shock. Cheng Yaojin and the other generals looked at me like I was a different person. I could see it in their eyes. They were thinking, asterisk, holy crap, Prince Shu is a savage. He actually said it. Asterisk. Even Zhongsun Wuji was stunned. I had just dropped a tactical nuke on the court's etiquette. My father, Emperor Li Shimin, looked like he was about to explode. His face went from red to a terrifying shade of black. He wasn't even angry at the content of my words. He was angry that I was stupid enough to say them out loud. I could almost hear him screaming in his head. Asterisk, are you an idiot? We talk about this in private, you brat. You don't throw this kind of heat around in front of the entire court. Asterisk. Zhongsun Wuji was caught completely off guard. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Everyone knew the unspoken rule. You don't talk about the succession or the power of the princes so bluntly. My father had taken the throne through the Xuanwu Gate incident because his military influence was too strong to ignore. By saying I understood strategy but chose to be lazy for my brother's sake, I had backed Wuji into a corner. How could he argue? If he said I was lying, he was calling me a genius general, a threat to the throne. If he said I was right, he was admitting I was being a good brother. Prince Shu, Wuji finally stammered, his brain struggling to keep up. The crown prince is standing right here. Are you suggesting that the crown prince or his majesty lacked the heart to tolerate a talented sibling? He was trying to flip it. He wanted to make it look like I was insulting my father's character. Why are you dragging my big brother into this? I shot back, my voice steady and fearless. I said it, and I'm not afraid of him misinterpreting it. Let me be clear. Even if my father retired today and offered me that throne, I wouldn't take it. The room went cold. People were literally breaking into cold sweats. They probably thought I was suicidal. No one talks about the throne being offered or rejected like it's a piece of leftover chicken. My brother, Li Chengqian, was sweating too. At first, he looked annoyed that I'd brought him up, but when I said I didn't want his job, he visibly relaxed. He looked at me with a mix of awe and gratitude, as if to say, "Third brother, you're the man. Keep talking, I won't say a word." Wuji was totally defeated. He couldn't join this conversation. This was a family matter, and any word he said could be twisted into treason. He had to calculate every syllable, but I was just throwing grenades. Finally, my father couldn't take it anymore. "Lik," he roared. "If he didn't stop me now, God knows what else I'd let slip." "I'm here, father," I said, instantly switching to a cheeky, innocent tone. "Don't be mad. I just have a big mouth. Besides, I'm speaking from the heart. I don't get why everyone is so scared. Picking a successor is a normal thing for a country. Look at me. Do I look like emperor material? Obviously not. Even if you begged me, I wouldn't do it. My big brother is the only choice. I just want to be a rich, idle prince. So don't be angry, Dad. You haven't done anything wrong by choosing him." Li Shimin looked like he wanted to strangle me and praise me at the same time. The ministers all lowered their heads, silently praying they wouldn't be dragged into this father-son therapy session. "Fine," I said, waving a hand dismissively. "Let's move on. Duke of Qi, I know why you're attacking me today. You're salty because of the condition I set yesterday, aren't you? You think I'm looking down on the Zhongsun family?" I turned to the room, addressing the generals and ministers. "Listen up, everyone. Yesterday, the Zhongsun family asked my father to finalize the marriage between my sister, Princess Changel, and Zhongsun Chong. You all know I've always been against this. But I decided to give them a chance. I set one simple condition." I paused for effect. "The condition is this. Within 1 year, the betrothal gifts from the Zhongsun family must be worth more than the dowry I personally give to my sister. Not the emperor's dowry, mine. If they can't even match what a single prince can provide, the engagement is off. Does that sound unfair to you? I bowed slightly to the dukes around me. Cheng Yaojin, who never liked Wuji anyway, let out a booming laugh. Unfair? Not at all. Duke of Qi, surely the great Zhangsun family isn't so poor that they can't outspend a young prince. Yuchi Gong chimed in, his voice like thunder. Exactly. If your gifts can't even beat a prince's personal savings, you'd be too embarrassed to marry a princess anyway, wouldn't you? Wuji's face turned a deep, bruised purple. He was trapped. If he refused, he was admitting his family was weak or stingy. Fine. Wuji snapped, his eyes narrowed. I accept. If our gifts don't surpass the prince's dowry, I will personally ask His Majesty to cancel the engagement. I wouldn't have the face to marry into the royal family otherwise. I clapped my hands loudly. Brilliant. The Duke of Qi is a man of his word. A word spoken is a horse galloped. No taking it back. I looked up at my father. He looked paralyzed. He probably wanted to smooth things over and play the humble host, but I had slammed the door shut before he could speak. If he disagreed now, it would look like he thought his own daughter wasn't worth the price. He just glared at me, his eyes telling me to get out before I burned the palace down. Since that's settled, I said with a smug grin, I'll take my leave. This is a place for important state business, after all. I didn't wait for a response. I turned on my heel and walked straight back to my seat, plopping down as if I hadn't just insulted the most powerful official in the court. My father, Emperor Li Shimin, cleared his throat. He looked like he wanted to scream, but he had a country to run. Fine, he announced, his voice tight. The meeting will proceed. This matter is settled for now. Who else has business to report? Zhangsun Wuji stood there for a second, his body trembling with suppressed rage. He eventually bowed and retreated to his spot. I could see the realization hitting him. I had played him. I had turned his grand impeachment into a petty squabble and then buried it under a high-stakes bet. He had been brushed aside, and there was nothing he could do about it. I caught him stealing a glance at me from across the hall. He looked bewildered. He was probably wondering if I had done that on purpose or if I was just a lucky idiot. If I had intentionally used that verbal trap to kill his impeachment, it meant I wasn't the brainless thug I pretended to be. But he eventually shook his head, dismissing the thought. I had spent years acting like a fool. I had done so many stupid things that anyone suggesting I was a secret mastermind would be laughed out of the room. People probably thought I was just having a particularly bold day. Wuji likely felt he still had the upper hand. Historically, he always did. He had manipulated my father into punishing me countless times. If it wasn't for his constant schemes, I wouldn't have felt the need to beat his son, Zhangsun Chong, every chance I got. I looked at the other ministers. They were wiping cold sweat from their brows, glancing nervously at the emperor. When they saw he was focused back on state affairs, they finally exhaled. I knew what they were thinking. They thought I had grown a pair of dragon's balls to speak to the emperor and Wuji like that. Luckily, my reputation as a hothead saved me. The emperor just chalked it up to my usual temper. But I wasn't just being a brat. I was calculating. Dealing with Zhangsun Wuji and the powerful Zheng family was a nightmare. They were part of the 5 great clans, the aristocratic families that truly controlled the pulse of the empire. Their influence was everywhere. Wuji's own wife was from the Zheng clan. While the top officials were mostly loyal to my father, the middle and lower ranks were crawling with clan members. If I didn't have my secret weapon, the Wellai Trading Company, I wouldn't stand a chance. I had spent years building a commercial network that spanned the country. In this era, business was the only way to fight bloodlines. No matter how powerful your family name was, you couldn't compete with someone who could crash the market prices of everyday goods. However, I had a major problem. I was broke. Well, not broke for a normal person, but compared to the Zhangsun family, I was a peasant. My younger brother, Li Yin, was a massive drain on my resources. In history, he was a useless playboy. In this life, I kept him on a short leash, but he still loved to spend money. Between our mother, Consort Yang, and me, we were constantly subsidizing his lifestyle. I beat him regularly to keep him in line, but the kid never learned. As the meeting wrapped up, I didn't stick around. I waved a quick goodbye to a few people and bolted for the exit. I knew my father. If I stayed, he'd find a reason to give me a taste of his cane for my performance today. I needed to disappear before the military guards were ordered to grab me. The ministers watched me run, some of them chuckling. They'd seen this show before. They often wondered how a brilliant man like Li Shimin and a gentle woman like Consort Yang could produce a son who acted more like the boisterous General Cheng Yaojing. I headed straight for the city gates. I had a manor outside the capital with land my father had gifted me. If I wanted to win this bet and crush Wuji, I needed to start production on my secret project, glass. I had the techniques memorized. In the 21st century, it was basic science, but in the Tang dynasty, it was divine magic. Clear glass, mirrors made with mercury. These were luxury items that would make the elite lose their minds. I couldn't wait to see Wuji's face when I showed up with a dowry that made us look like trash. I stopped at the Changle Gate, the main exit for officials. I leaned against the stone wall, watching the high-ranking ministers trickle out of the palace complex. I wasn't leaving just yet. I was waiting for someone. The reason I was waiting there was simple. The Department of State was located to the left, which meant Zhongsun Wuji had to pass through this gate to leave. As the officials poured out of Changle Gate, they froze the moment they saw me standing there. I could see the gears turning in their heads. They were probably wondering if the Prince of Shu was about to get into a fist fight with the Duke of Qi right there in the street. My reputation for violence preceded me. Old General Cheng Yaojin was leading the pack, but as soon as he spotted me, he came to a dead stop. With a mischievous glint in his eye, he stepped aside, deliberately clearing a path so Zhongsun Wuji was left standing front and center. Wuji saw me, and his heart must have skipped a beat. He knew I was a reckless brute who didn't care about decorum. It wasn't that he was afraid of the pain. He was afraid of the humiliation. Getting thrashed by a prince in public would ruin his prestige forever. "Hey, big brother. I've been waiting for you," I shouted, completely ignoring Wuji. I wasn't there for the old fox. I was waiting for the crown prince, Li Chengqian. My goal was simple. I wanted to make Wuji's blood boil. Li Chengqian looked stunned. My relationship with him wasn't actually that bad. To be fair, he got along with most of his brothers, except for that snakely tie. "Third brother, do you need something?" he asked, sounding confused. "Brother, listen," I said, my voice booming so everyone could hear. "The Huiwa house just got a new courtesan. Her singing is incredible. My treat today. I'm taking you there to enjoy the show." Zhongsun Wuji's face turned instant charcoal black. He had just finished denouncing me in court for being a useless playboy who spent all his time in brothels. Now, here I was, inviting the crown prince to a pleasure house right in front of his face. And to rub salt in the wound, Wuji was the crown prince's uncle. Behind him, Cheng Yaojin and the other military officers were nearly vibrating with suppressed laughter. They loved this. I never let a grudge sit overnight. If someone crossed me, I hit back immediately. If I hadn't been afraid of my father's cane, I probably would have extended the invitation right inside the palace hall. Waiting until the gate was actually a sign of great restraint on my part. "Your Highness, don't go ruining the reputation of the girls at the brothel," Cheng Yaojin joked, stepping in to play the peacemaker. He knew I wasn't serious and that the crown prince couldn't actually go. "We all know you only go there to listen to music, right?" He winked at me, and the group of military men burst into raucous laughter. It was a running joke among the inner circle. For years, I'd frequented those places, but I truly only listened to the music. The most beautiful women in the capital wanted a piece of me, yet I never touched a single one. To these rough soldiers, it was the funniest thing in the world. "Get lost, all of you." I rolled my eyes. "What do you know? All you lot care about is slapping a woman's backside. You have no taste." "Haha. Your Highness is still young," one of the generals laughed. "You don't know what you're missing yet." The civil officials nearby frowned, scurrying away from our crude conversation as if it were a disease. Zhongsun Wuji let out a sharp, cold snort and stormed off without a word. Li Chengqian gave me a helpless smile. "Third brother, go enjoy yourself. I have duties to attend to, so I can't join you." Fair enough," I grinned. "I'll come visit your palace another day then." I gave him a respectful bow. He nodded and walked away with a slight limp. My father had offered him a carriage because of his leg injury, but Chengqian always refused. He insisted on walking. Watching his back, I felt a pang of sympathy. Since I transmigrated, Chengqian had been a genuinely good big brother. He was a hardworking crown prince, dedicated to learning how to rule and kind to all his siblings. In the history I knew, he eventually went off the rails, but I realized now it was because the pressure broke him. Imagine studying 18 hours a day from the age of 8, trying to be perfect, only to have your father decide he might replace you because of a limp. It would drive anyone insane. Once he was gone, I turned back to the generals and cupped my hands. Duke of Lu, gentlemen, I'm off. Next time, the drinks are on me. I'll bring the strongest liquor you've ever tasted. I'm holding you to that, Prince of Shu. Cheng Yaojin chuckled, waving me off. I didn't waste any more time. I hopped on my horse and galloped toward my estate outside the city. Back in the palace, my father, Li Shimin, was waiting for a report. When his aide, Chong Ling, returned, the emperor looked up expectantly. Well, where is he? Reporting to your majesty, the Prince of Shu left a long time ago, Chong Ling replied. He almost said fled, instead of left. Oomph, my father snorted. That brat. He never has this much foresight when it comes to his studies, but he's the fastest runner when trouble is coming. Tell me, Chong Ling, have I been underestimating that boy? Chong Ling stayed silent. He knew better than to jump into a family argument. My father paced the room. You saw him in court. He dodged Wuji's accusations with nonsense and managed to corner me into that bet. He basically settled the matter right under my nose. He's got more skill than he lets on. Your Majesty, Chong Ling said cautiously, what if a year from now, the prince actually produces a dowry larger than the Duke of Qi's betrothal gifts? Li Shimin froze. It was a possibility he hadn't even considered. That's unlikely. The Zhangsun family has been with me since the beginning. Their wealth is immense, and they have massive business interests. What does Li Ke have? That little Yulai trading firm of his barely breaks even. There's no way he can outspend the Duke of Qi. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. But deep down, I knew my father was in for a very expensive surprise. Sure, I might be a bit reckless, Chong Ling said, breaking the silence in the room. But think about it, Your Majesty. In all these years, has the Prince of Shu ever fought a battle he wasn't sure he could win? My father, Li Shimin, paused. He looked at Chong Ling, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He realized things weren't as stable as they seemed. The problem was, he couldn't wrap his head around how I was supposed to get that kind of money. It wasn't like I could just break the law or embezzle funds. I didn't even have the position to do that. It's already done, my father muttered, rubbing his temples. It's too late to change it now. He was starting to get a headache. The real issue was the aftermath. If I actually produced a dowry larger than the Zhangsun family's, and my father tried to back out, Zhangsun Wuji would never let him hear the end of it. The old man was too proud to lose face like that. Despite the stress, my father was curious. He wanted to see how I planned to make a fortune in just 1 year. I didn't care what they were thinking. Back at my estate outside the city, I stayed behind closed doors. I was waiting for Lu Daqiang and his team to finish the prototypes I had designed. According to the reports Tian Meng gave me, they were close. Just 1 day later, Tian Meng came rushing in, his face beaming with excitement. Your Highness, the spinning machine and the loom, they're both finished. I stood up instantly, my heart racing. Let's go see them. I couldn't help but grin. Zhangsun Wuji, you old fox, just you wait. You want to compare wealth? I'm about to change the game entirely. I followed Tian Meng to a nearby courtyard he had cleared out specifically for production. When I arrived, the machines were already assembled and lined up. Raw silk and yarn were prepped and ready to go. A spinner and a weaver stood by their respective stations, looking at me with an intensity that bordered on worship. They had already tested the machines. To them, these wooden contraptions were nothing short of divine. Don't just stand there, I said, waving my hand. Let's see the spinning machine in action. Tian Meng signaled the worker. The man grabbed the large flywheel and gave it a hard turn. That single motion set 16 smaller spindles into a blur of motion. As they spun, the raw silk twisted together, forming yarn at a speed that was mind-blowing. It was 16 times faster than the traditional method. And this was just the beginning. Once I perfected bearings and ball units, I could hook this up to a steam engine and run 160 spindles at once. Excellent, I said, clapping my hands. Tian Meng, give them a reward. In the Tang dynasty, silk and fabric weren't just clothes, they were currency. The government hadn't minted enough coins to keep up with the economy, and the old Sui dynasty coins were trash. Because of the shortage, bolts of silk were used to buy everything. Producing silk was literally like printing money. The profit margins for most families were slim, about 30%, because the labor was so intensive. But with my machines, that was about to change. Try the loom, I ordered. The weaver stepped up to the flying shuttle loom. The shuttle zipped back and forth with a rhythmic thwack-thwack. It was a blur of efficiency. Your Highness, Tianming said, his voice trembling slightly. We did the math. The weaving efficiency is 8 times higher than before. Our total cost for a bolt of silk, including labor and materials, is only 1/20th of our competitors. He took a breath to steady himself. Normally, it costs 210 won to produce one bolt, and it sells for 300. Our cost, it's down to 96 won. Most of that is just the raw materials. I smiled. This was it. Lu Daqiang, how long to build a full set? If we use the assembly line method you described and have 300 men, Lu Daqiang replied quickly, we can put out one spinning machine and one loom every 2 days. Tianming, get 600 men, I commanded. Start production immediately. Then, have the Yulai trading firm start buying up every bit of raw silk around the Xingyang Zheng family's territory. Offer them 100 won per bolt's worth of silk. I wanted to rip the rug out from under the great noble families. Since silk was currency, I didn't even need gold to buy the raw materials. I could just use the silk I produced to buy more silk. It was a self-sustaining loop of wealth. But Your Highness, Tianming hesitated. Most of the farmers are under contract with the big families like the Zhengs. They won't dare break them. The influence of those clans is too strong for commoners to defy. I paused, thinking. A new idea started to form in my mind, something even more devastating. Wait, I said. Tianming, go to my study. Grab that box I brought from the city, the one wrapped in silk. Bring me those books. Yes, Your Highness, he said, though he looked confused. I turned back to the machines. Master Lu, come here. I have another adjustment for you. Keep working, I told the craftsman, waving my hand to keep them focused. Master Lu, once the spinning machines and looms are running smoothly, start building the jacquard machines immediately. After the initial phase, you and the senior masters can leave the daily oversight to the juniors. Your main task will be innovation. I want you to find ways to improve these machines. If you can make them even more efficient, I'll go to my father and secure noble titles for all of you. Lu Daqiang and his men didn't just bow, they dropped to their knees. In the Great Tang, kneeling wasn't a daily requirement. Even when meeting my father, the emperor, a deep bow was usually enough. But this time, they knelt with pure, raw sincerity. A noble title? That was the dream of every great family in the land. For a craftsman, it was an impossible fantasy. But I was a prince. If I said it was possible, they believed me. I never underestimated the wisdom of the ancients. My modern books mostly leaped straight to steam engines, which were too advanced for our current power and metallurgy. What I needed from these masters was incremental genius, refining the mechanics to make them faster, lighter, and easier to use with human power. These men were the equivalent of 8th-grade master technicians from my old world. They were brilliant. While Tianming sent someone to fetch my books, I started running the numbers in my head. I knew the national budget for the 9th year of the Jingguan era. The total revenue was about 10.5 million strings of coins, but actual copper cash only made up 2 million of that. The rest was grain, silk, and cloth. Silk alone accounted for over 2 million strings, and hemp cloth contributed another 2.5 million. In fact, textiles made up 58% of the Tang dynasty's entire financial revenue. As I calculated, a plan began to solidify. Tianming returned with the silk-wrapped box. I opened it, pulling out a specific volume, and began to read intently. Tianming waited silently by my side as Lu Daqiang and the others packed up to get back to work. After an hour, I looked up, my eyes bright. Tianming, I have an idea. Analyze this for me. Please, Your Highness, he replied instantly. You said the influence of the great 7 noble families is massive, but they can't possibly control everyone in the world, right? The tax system in the early Tang was unique, the Xiangxiu system. The state gave every household 100 acres of land. 20 acres were theirs forever, and 80 were rented from the government. In return, they paid taxes in grain and textiles. Because the Tang didn't have monopolies on salt or iron yet, and there were no taxes on business, the great families didn't have the same absolute grip on the peasantry that later landlords would. Their real power came from their monopoly on books and education. Almost every government official came from their ranks. Breaking that was a nightmare for my father. But for me, I looked at the book in my hand. No wonder people in the future called these strategies dragon-slaying techniques. The world belongs to the Li family, Tianming said quickly. The great families are few in number. Their power comes from the network of smaller local clans that align with them. It's a united front. Exactly, I said, a wicked smile spreading across my face. Now, what if we don't just run the Yulai trading firm as one entity? What if we restructure it? We create a branch for every single county. Then, these branches partner with those small local clans. We buy the raw silk directly from them. I leaned in. Our production cost for a bolt of silk, labor and materials included, is about 6-1. Their traditional cost is around 121. If I offer to produce high-quality silk for them at a flat rate of 101 per bolt, would they take the deal? Is that even a question? Tianming blurted out. They'd save on labor, materials, and transport. They'd make more profit buying from us than making it themselves. Only a fool would refuse. Good. Then after a year of making them rich, do you think I'll have those small clans in my pocket? Of course, Tianming said. Profit is the most powerful tool there is. Then here's the final question, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Once I've won over every small family in the country, how much influence will the great 7 families actually have left? And can I use those small families to reach the very farmers they buy from? Tianming went pale. He stood there, completely stunned. He realized what I was doing. I was cutting the legs out from under the giants by befriending the ants. I felt a surge of pure satisfaction. Back home, we called this surrounding the cities from the countryside. It was about uniting every force that could be united. The great clans were the gatekeepers and the elite landlords. They were the enemy. Everyone else was a potential ally. For now, I was just a factory. But I was a factory that held a monopoly on technology. By the time the great families realized they needed to compete, I would have started a price war that would leave them weeping in the dirt. Do you understand now? I asked. I understand, Tianming whispered, looking at me with newfound terror and respect. Your Highness, you mean to? Aside from the branches in the western regions and the grasslands, I want every Yulai branch in the silk and hemp districts to change their names, I commanded. Let them choose whatever names they want. Stay hidden. Tianming listened intently as I laid out the strategy. I wanted these branches to approach the small local families directly. We would offer to produce silk for 100 won per bolt and hemp for 80. We would handle the labor. We would handle the transport. Tell the Longmen Guard to shift their strength, I continued. As soon as Lu Daqiang finishes the new looms and spinning machines, transport them to the production zones immediately. Also, start buying raw silk and hemp at 10 won per bundle. No limits. Buy everything. Tianming's eyes went wide. He was doing the math. The Tang Empire produced tens of millions of bolts of cloth every year. Even a small profit per bolt would add up to 700,000 guan. That was nearly a tenth of the entire empire's annual tax revenue. In my old world, a logistics network this massive would be worth trillions. But money wasn't the only goal. I was building something deeper. The real power of the Yulai branches wasn't the name. It was the loyalty of the people. I hadn't told Tianming the second half of the plan yet. This year, we would build partnerships. Next year, I would invite these small families to become shareholders. I was creating a massive cooperative. Once they were tied to my profits, they would be tied to me. These families won't trust a random merchant, I said, pulling out my jade seal. Stamp my royal seal on every contract. Send them out fast. I didn't care about my reputation as a prince. A title was just a tool, and in this era, a business without a powerful backer was just waiting to be swallowed whole. These small families were desperate to cling to someone important. I was giving them that chance. Yes, Your Highness, Tianming said, bowing deeply. Next, check on the glass workshop, I added. And the tea. Are the workers trained in the new roasting methods yet? They'll be ready in a day or two, he replied. I nodded. The people of the Tang dynasty still drank tea by boiling it with milk and salt. It was a mess. I had the knowledge of the 6 great Chinese teas: green, black, oolong, yellow, dark, and white. I knew the best regions for West Lake Longjing and Dahongpo. Even if we couldn't control the land yet, the wild tea leaves were there for the taking. I just had to pay people to pick them. Focus on the glass and soap for now, I reminded him. That's our short-term gold mine. I warned him to be careful with the soap. The byproduct, glycerin, was a dangerous chemical in the wrong hands. Glass was simpler. 2 days later, the first batch was ready. I looked at the rectangular slab of green-tinted glass resting on a metal plate. It looked just like the cheap window glass from my childhood. The green tint came from iron impurities we couldn't filter out yet, and the surface was a bit rough. But it was a start. Prepare the mercury, I told Tianming. It's time to make the mirrors. And get the glass blowers started on cups and bottles. Glass was a luxury, not a necessity like cloth. We didn't need mass production yet. We needed prestige. 3 days later, the first mercury mirror was finished. Tianming stood frozen in front of it. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. He had never seen his own reflection with such clarity. How many do we have? I asked. 7 full-length mirrors, Your Highness, he stammered. 11 wash-basin-sized ones, and about 30 small hand mirrors. Stop at 10 full-length ones, I ordered. Then pivot the workshop. Build more furnaces. Keep the glass-making process a total secret. No one gets near that workshop. I looked at the shimmering surfaces. It was time to go back to Chang'an. That city was the heart of the empire's wealth, filled with officials and merchants who had more money than sense. Load them up, I said, a smirk playing on my lips. We're going home to get rich. Tianming scrambled to organize the transport. Moving glass over bumpy roads was a nightmare, but the payoff would be worth it. I didn't plan on selling these in a shop. I needed a celebrity endorsement. And in this world, there was no bigger influencer than my father, the emperor. By the time I arrived at the palace with my cargo, it was late afternoon. I didn't waste any time. I headed straight for the Liangyi Hall, the place where my father, Li Shimin, usually spent his time when he wasn't busy. Where is the emperor? I asked a young eunuch. His Majesty is at the Liangyi Hall, Your Highness, the boy replied, bowing low. The empress hasn't been feeling well today. I nodded. I knew the history. Empress Zhangsun had given birth to Princess Xinqing last winter, and her health had been failing ever since her 4th son was born. In a commoner's house, she would have been gone long ago. Even with the best royal physicians, she only had about a year left. Maybe that was why she was so desperate to see my sister, Li Lizzie, married off so soon. To the Liangyi Hall, then, I commanded. I gestured to the guards behind me. They were hauling heavy, specially made wooden crates. You can't exactly drive a carriage through the palace inner sanctum, so we had to do this the hard way. As we approached the hall, I knew the scouts had already reported my arrival. Li Shimin was probably wondering why I was showing up with a small army of crates. I spotted them in the courtyard. The empress was sitting in the small garden, trying to enjoy the fresh air despite her illness. Li Shimin stood beside her. Erlang, please, calm down, I heard the empress say with a soft smile. He's clearly here for a reason. Don't start shouting at him the moment he arrives. He hasn't caused any trouble in days, has he? Li Shimin looked at her, exasperated. Guanyin, your standards for him are getting dangerously low. You're satisfied just because he hasn't started a riot in 3 days. One must find joy in the small things, she teased. I marched into the garden, grinning. I saw them watching me, curious about the spectacle. Just you wait, old man, I thought. I'm about to show you how a real businessman operates. Zhangsun Wuji, the Zhangsun family? Forget them. I'm going to be the richest man in Chang'an, even if my own father tries to stop me. Hurry up, move it. I barked at the guards, acting intentionally loud and proud. Li Shimin let out a cold snort. Before I could even open my mouth to brag, he beat me to it. Li Ku, I didn't come looking for trouble with you, and yet you have the nerve to show up here, his voice boomed. I froze in my tracks. My mind raced. I hadn't done anything wrong recently. Was he just taking out his bad mood on me again? It wouldn't be the first time. What are you standing there for? Get over here, he roared. Father, what's your problem? I shouted back, staying exactly where I was. I haven't done a thing to bother you lately. You haven't, he sneered. Then tell me, why weren't you at the morning court session yesterday? Oh, right. I had completely forgotten about that. But I couldn't tell him that. If I admitted I forgot, he'd use it as an excuse to punish me. I puffed out my chest and put on my best righteous face. Father, you can't blame me for that. What's the point of me going to court anyway? I told you last time, I'm a prince. I'm happy just being a carefree royal. You don't actually expect me to govern the country or expand the borders, do you? If I did that, I'd just be making things awkward for you and my eldest brother. Li Shimin rolled his eyes. You really think too highly of yourself. The Empress chuckled. She knew Li Shimin wasn't actually angry. If he were, he would have sent guards to drag me out of bed yesterday. He was just playing his part. Enough of that nonsense, Li Shimin said, pointing at the crates. Get over here. What's in the boxes? These? I grinned, my confidence returning. These are gifts for the Empress. A gift for me? She looked intrigued. Open them, I commanded. The guards stepped forward, unlatching the crates. They pulled out a large, flat object wrapped in red cloth and a wooden frame. They assembled the stand quickly, then hoisted the heavy, rectangular piece onto it. I had used high-quality rosewood for the frame, not the ultra-expensive sandalwood, but something that looked just as prestigious. Li Shimin and the Empress stepped closer, their curiosity piqued by the size of the thing. Mother, this is my gift to you, I said proudly. I had a strategy here. First, she was the Empress. She got the first of everything. Second, I knew she was the key to getting Li Shimin to open his wallet. With a flourish, I grabbed the red cloth and yanked it down. The cloth fell away, revealing a mercury mirror, something that shouldn't have existed in this era. The Empress let out a sharp gasp. Even Li Shimin looked like he'd been struck by lightning, though he tried to hide his shock. What? What is this? The Empress whispered. It's a mercury mirror, Mother. I invented it myself, I said, keeping a straight face. She stepped toward it, mesmerized. In this world, people only knew bronze mirrors or reflections in water. They were blurry, yellow, and distorted. But this showed every hair, every detail, every color with perfect clarity. She was the Empress, yes, but she was also a woman. And no woman could resist this. You invented this, Kuer? She asked, her eyes wide with wonder. I did. And to be honest, I made it because I need to make some money. I have to prepare a dowry for my younger sisters, after all. I poured every cent of my allowance into the research for this. My household hasn't even been able to pay the servants for months. As soon as the first one worked, I brought it straight to you. Oh, you poor child, she said, her heart clearly softening. I had no idea you were struggling so much. If your funds are gone, you must tell me. How much did this cost? I'll pay for it myself. Oh, I couldn't possibly take your money, Mother, I said quickly, glancing at my father. They say behind every successful man, there is always a virtuous woman. I said it with a straight face, looking directly at my father. Father, you were able to become the emperor of the Great Tang because of Mother's unwavering support. As the mother of the nation, she works day and night. She's exhausted herself for this empire. As her son, how could I possibly take her money for a simple gift? If I marry a princess one day, I want her to be just like Mother. I'll treat her with everything I have and buy her the best things in the world. I sounded incredibly sincere. At first, Li Shimin looked quite pleased. He probably thought that even if I was a bit of a brat, I at least knew how to speak well. But as I kept talking, his expression shifted. He started to realize something wasn't quite right. I could see the Empress was genuinely touched. It wasn't just the gift, it was the recognition. For years, she had swallowed her grievances and hidden her tears to keep the palace running smoothly. She made sure the other concubines behaved so that father could focus on the empire. She had never let him worry for a single second about the inner palace. No, Kuer, the Empress said with a soft smile. You spent every penny you had to invent this. I can't let you walk away empty-handed. How much do you plan to sell these for? Mother, I told you, I won't take your money, I insisted. And it's not just for you. I've prepared mirrors for my younger sisters, my own mother, and the other consorts. It's my duty as a son and a brother. I know I've been a bit wild lately, But I'm a man who takes responsibility. I won't run away from what I owe my family. That is a man's promise. I spoke with such righteous indignation that Li Shimon's face turned black. He finally caught on. I was cornering him. Standing nearby, the eunuch Chong Ling was struggling not to laugh. I had laid the trap perfectly. How could the emperor stay silent now? Fine, Li Shimon finally snapped. I felt a wave of relief. Finally, old man. If you hadn't spoken up, I would have run out of lines. You have a point, Li Shimon said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You shouldn't pay, and your mother shouldn't pay. I suppose that leaves only your father to foot the bill. An elder's gift cannot be refused, I said, bowing deeply. Li Shimon looked like he wanted to kick me. He realized I wasn't just some kid who read books to improve his character. I used books as weapons. I had used his own logic to checkmate him, and as the emperor, he couldn't exactly go back on his word. How much for the whole set? He asked, his forehead creasing with annoyance. I held up a single finger. Not much. Just this. 100,000 strings of copper. Li Shimon glared at me. You call that not much? Wait, you're offering that much? I blinked, acting surprised. Then I should definitely raise the price. Look, father, who else in the Great Tang can use a full-length mirror like this? Only you, mother, and the consorts. Even my sisters. It's a limited edition. No one else would dare own one. It took me 3 whole years of research to master the craft. I only just finished this batch. Li Shimon looked at the mirror, which was as tall as he was. He had to admit, it was unique. How many are there in total? 17, I said, bowing again. I'll give you a discount. Just 16,000 strings per mirror. Total of 1,600,000. Li Shimon did the math in his head. He realized I had calculated the numbers long before I walked into the room. What? You think your father can't afford that last mirror? He asked, squinting at me. Of course not, I said, my posture turning serious. One of those mirrors is my personal gift to you. You paying for mother and the others is your responsibility as a husband and a father. I wouldn't dream of taking that away from you. But the one I give you is for the emperor who works day and night for the people. It's for the father who built a prosperous Tang for us to enjoy. Father, you haven't noticed, but you have gray hairs now. You're still young, but you work too hard. This gift is nothing compared to what you've given us. The room went silent. Li Shimon froze. Even the empress looked stunned. I didn't use fancy poetry or ancient quotes. I just spoke the truth. Li Shimon stared at me for a long time. Then, he let out a cold snort. Humph, stop being so sentimental. You think I care about that little bit of money? I'll give you 20,000 strings per mirror. Consider it a reward for having a conscience and remembering your family. Thank you, father, I said quickly. Then, I let my expression crumble into one of guilt. But honestly, taking all this money makes me feel uneasy. I want to use it for something important. I hope you and mother will allow it. What do you want to do? The empress asked, her voice full of pride. The Tang is growing stronger every day, I explained. But as Chang'an prospers, the population grows. There are so many orphans in the streets and refugees outside the city walls. They barely earn enough to eat. Last winter, I saw people freezing to death. Shadows always exist where there is light, but if there are too many, it will hurt your reputation, father. I want to take this money and build a place by the Wei River. I want to call it the Great Tang Royal Welfare Park. What exactly is this for? My father, Li Shimon, frowned, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. I stood my ground and explained my vision. I planned to move all the workshops and industries under my trading company into this one park. For labor, I wanted to prioritize the refugees and the orphans. Especially the orphans. They were young and vulnerable. If left to grow up on the streets, they'd inevitably turn into thugs and street rats. They would become a cancer on the empire. I wanted to bring them in, give them food and shelter, and teach them trades they could actually handle. That way, when they grew up, they could become productive citizens or even join the Tang army to fight for our borders. It was a win-win for everyone. I spoke with total sincerity. Li Shimon and the empress exchanged a long look. My father seemed genuinely surprised. He knew the problem well. Chang'an was divided into 2 districts, Wanyin in the east and Chang'an in the west. With over 1 million people, the city was a logistical nightmare. Crime was rampant in the 108 wards. Gangs and secret societies recruited directly from these displaced people and street kids. It wasn't just an eyesore. It was a major security threat. For years, local officials had reported this, but nothing worked. They tried increasing the guard and strengthening the constabulary, but they only treated the symptoms, not the cause. My idea was different. It hit the root of the problem. Not bad, my father said, nodding with uncharacteristic approval. You've finally come up with a decent idea. Since this is for the good of the state, we'll discuss it at court. The government will provide the funding. No, I blurted out. I nearly panicked. If the government paid for it, my father would eventually find out the truth about my profits, and he'd beat me to death. Plus, if they paid, they owned it. Father, this is my gift to you. You're paying for the mirrors for mother and my sisters, and honestly, that money feels heavy in my hands. I want to use it for this. Let me run it as a trial. If it works, you can expand it later. Oh, my father looked curious. Tell me more. I decided to lay it on thick. I just need one thing from you, Father. Write me a personal inscription. I'll turn it into a grand plaque to hang at the entrance. That way, every refugee and orphan will know of your imperial benevolence. I was practically speaking like a scholar now, forcing the words out. It worked. My father looked satisfied. He loved a good reputation. Fine, I'll write it for you. It's a worthy cause. Thank you, Father. I'll head over to the Chang'an County Magistrate to buy the land tomorrow and bring the deeds to you, I said, playing the humble son. What nonsense is that? Li Shimin waved his hand dismissively. You're doing the state's work with your own money. If I made you buy the land too, what kind of emperor would I be? Tomorrow, I'll issue a decree. The magistrate will grant you 10,000 acres. Keep the deeds. If the project fails, consider the land a gift. I feigned hesitation, but the empress smiled and stepped in. Kur, listen to your father. This park is being built in his name. If he contributes nothing, it looks bad for the royal family's prestige. Then I won't refuse, I said, secretly cheering. I wanted to give the empress a thumbs up. Father, could you write the inscription now? I want to get started immediately. My father didn't hesitate. He called for his attendant, Chong Ling, to bring brush and ink. They brought out high-quality Xian paper, the kind so thick and layered that master forgers in the future would peel it apart to make 2 paintings out of one. What should I write? My father asked, brush in hand. Right, the Great Tang Royal Welfare Industrial Park, I said quickly. And if you don't mind, sign your name. The commoners should know this was your vision. He nodded and began to write. The characters were bold and powerful. On the left side, he added 4 more, written by Li Shimin. Thank you, Father. I bowed deeply. You've shown some heart today, he said, looking at the paper. Tell you what, I'll write a few more pieces for you. No, that's plenty. I stopped him immediately. He looked at me, surprised. Usually, people begged for his calligraphy, but I knew better. The more he wrote now, the harder he'd hit me later when he realized I was using his name to build a massive commercial empire. I had to stay humble. I haven't achieved anything yet. If you write too much and I fail, it'll make you look bad. Once I succeed, you can write for me for 3 days and nights straight. Get out of here, he laughed, waving me off. You want me to write for 3 days? Forget it then. I'm going, I said, backing toward the door. I'll leave you and Mother to your public displays of affection. My father blinked, confused by the modern slang. What kind of nonsense are you talking about now? Oh, Father, I teased. I might not be married, but I've read enough books to know love when I see it. Every woman in this world just wants to be loved by her husband, I said, my voice smooth and confident. Most people don't get the chance to show off their affection like this. One day, the love between you and Mother will be a legend told across the empire. I didn't miss a beat. I piled on the flattery, gave Empress Zhang's son a formal bow, and prepared to make my exit. You may go, she said, but then she paused, a warm smile breaking across her face. Kur, remember, don't be so reckless in the future. If you run into any trouble, you come find me. Do you understand? I understand, Mother. I'll leave your gifts here in the palace, I replied, bowing one last time. I walked out of the palace, my back straight and composed. But the moment I cleared 100 meters, I let out a massive sigh of relief. My lungs felt like they were finally getting air again. I quickly pulled the scroll with my father's calligraphy from my robe and handed it to a guard who had followed me inside. Take this back to the Tianming headquarters immediately, I whispered urgently. Find the best craftsman. Get a massive tree and carve a giant plaque first. Then, look for a boulder. We need a stone monument, but the plaque is the priority. Go. The guard took the paper like it was made of gold and vanished. Back in the palace, the atmosphere had shifted. My parting words had clearly hit the mark. Li Shimin looked at the Empress, a small, knowing smile tugging at his lips. That brat knows far too much for his own good. He grumbled, though there was no real heat in his voice. He waved his hand at his attendants. All of you out. Chong Ling and the others bowed and retreated. They didn't go far, but they gave the royal couple their space. Once they were gone, my father stepped forward and pulled Empress Zhang's son into a firm embrace from behind. The Empress leaned into him, feeling a sudden surge of gratitude toward me. They had been married for years, but this kind of intimacy was usually reserved for the dark of their private chambers. This warm, quiet affection reminded her of when they were both much younger. Erling, she whispered softly, using his personal name. Hearing her voice, my father felt a twinge of guilt. He realized that, despite all his power, he understood less about romance than his own troublesome son. Guanyin Bi, he said softly, using her childhood name. I've let you suffer these past few years. Don't say that, she replied firmly. I have never regretted marrying you. While they were busy being sentimental, I was already on the move. I left the 2 full-length mirrors and a few smaller hand mirrors with the Empress's staff and headed toward the living quarters of the younger princesses. Changel, Qingyang, and Jinyang lived nearby. Changel was older, so she had her own courtyard. The youngest, Xinxing, was still a baby living with the Empress, but Chengyang and Jinyang were inseparable. Usually, they hung out with Changel to avoid the stifling atmosphere of our parents' company. I found them in a small garden nearby. Jinyang and Chengyang were running around while Changel sat gracefully, playing the zither. The moment the 2 little ones saw me, they shrieked with joy. Third brother. Third brother. They sprinted toward me. I laughed, bending down to scoop one up in each arm. Qingyang was about 5 or 6, so she was a bit shy, but the Tang dynasty was relatively open-minded, so she didn't pull away. Third brother, I missed you so much. Jinyang chirped in her sweet, milky voice. Oh, did you miss me? Or did you miss the toys I bring you? I teased. I missed you, she insisted, pouting. You're the only one who plays with us. 9th brother won't play, big brother is always busy, and 4th brother? 9th brother was Li Ji, the future Emperor Gaozong, but right now he was just an 8-year-old brat. All right, I laughed, setting them down. I brought something special for you today. What is it? They shouted in unison, their eyes sparkling. I signaled my guards, who carried a heavy crate forward. Changel stopped playing and walked over, her curiosity piqued. I didn't hold back. I had the guards pull out the mercury mirrors and unveil them. The girls gasped. Even Changel covered her mouth in shock, staring at the crystal-clear reflection. Well, how's the gift? I asked proudly. Third brother, you're amazing. Qingyang cried, already making faces at her own reflection. It's so clear, Changel whispered, touching the smooth glass. What is this? It's a mercury mirror, I whispered back, leaning in so the little ones wouldn't hear. This is how I'm going to build your dowry. I've put a lot of work into this. Changel's eyes misted over. None of her other brothers, not the crown prince, not Li Tai, ever put this much thought into her future. They usually just gave her a polite nod and moved on. Third brother. If it's too hard, I don't mind marrying him, she said softly. Don't talk nonsense, I snapped gently. Trust me, a year from now, unless the Zhang family produces a genius like me, they won't be able to match the dowry I'm building for you. By genius, I meant another transmigrator, which was highly unlikely. Changel nodded vigorously, her faith in me restored. I have to go now, I said. I need to visit my mother. You girls stay and play. We want to go too. All 3 of them shouted. Fine. Let's go together. Because I treated them so well, the 3 princesses were very close to my mother, Consort Yang. They often visited her when I wasn't around. Her palace was located to the right of the Liangyi Hall. In our world, the left was the side of honor, which was why the empress lived on the left. I realized then that I had actually changed the language of the palace. Terms like mother queen, mother consort, and child subject weren't standard before I arrived. I had used them out of habit from the shows I watched in my past life, and since no one corrected me early on, they just stuck. We reached my mother's palace, and I didn't bother with a formal announcement. "Mom, I'm here," I shouted from the courtyard. "Mom, we're here too." Jinyang and Changyang mimicked me, giggling. Technically, they shouldn't call her that, but no one was going to stop them. Inside, Consort Yang heard the commotion and came rushing out, a look of surprise and joy on her face. When my mother, Consort Yang, heard the voices of Jinyang and Changyang, she came rushing out to greet us. She had a gentle soul. Even though she was one of my father's favorites, she never let it go to her head. She understood her position in the palace perfectly. In reality, her marriage to my father was a cold political calculation. History books might claim Li Shimin was a womanizer with strange tastes, but marrying the women of the fallen Sui dynasty was about power, not lust. He needed the support of the Hongnong clan to stabilize the Tang Empire. My mother was a bridge between the old world and the new. Changle stepped forward and gave my mother a respectful bow. Unlike me, she had been raised with strict etiquette and wouldn't dream of calling a consort mom so casually. Come in, my mother said, her eyes shining as she looked at me. Why did you bring all these things?" "I'm here to bring you a gift," I said, flashing a wide grin. "My father bought this for you." She froze, looking stunned. The emperor bought this. It was a shock to her. My father rarely spent money on gifts because, frankly, he had nowhere to spend it. I signaled my men to carry the heavy crates into the hall. When I unveiled the mercury mirrors, the room seemed to brighten instantly. My mother gasped as she saw her reflection with perfect clarity. "Did you make this?" she whispered. "I did," I replied. "Father felt bad for you and the other consorts, so he decided to buy these for everyone." My mother shot me a sharp look. "You actually charged your own father for these?" She knew me too well. I was the only person in the palace gutsy enough to treat the emperor like a customer. My mother was a cautious woman by nature, yet she had given birth to a son who feared nothing. For years, she had lived in constant anxiety, terrified that my boldness would finally push the emperor too far. But she also knew I had a sense of timing. I knew exactly how far I could push before the line snapped. "Mom, it wasn't my idea," I said, lying through my teeth. "I tried to give them to him for free, but he insisted. He said it was a man's responsibility to provide for his women and daughters. I couldn't say no to that." My mother stared at me. She probably believed about 3% of what I just said. "Auntie, just accept it," Qingyang added, trying to help me out. "It's only right to pay third brother. He spent a lot of money making these, and he doesn't have a job." My mother laughed, the tension breaking. "You two always take his side. I don't know what kind of spell he's put on you." "It's because he brings us the best snacks," Jinyang chirped. I patted their heads affectionately. "I didn't spoil you for nothing. I'll bring you even better things in a few days." We sat and talked for half an hour before Changle stood up, leading the two younger ones away. She was a sharp girl. She could tell I had something private to discuss with my mother. As soon as the door closed, my mother's expression turned serious. "Did you interfere with Changle's marriage to the Zhangsun family again?" "I'm her brother," I said firmly. "I have to look out for her." She sighed deeply. In this palace, siblings from different mothers were usually rivals, but I treated all my sisters with genuine love. I treated everyone according to how they treated me. I was kind to the princesses, but I was cold to Li Tai because he was an arrogant brat. My mother looked at me with a mix of sadness and pride. She knew why I was so close to the empress's daughters. Because of her Sui dynasty bloodline, she was often isolated and excluded by the other factions in the harem. By winning over the princesses, I was ensuring that Empress Zhangsun would look favorably upon her. I acted like a delinquent, but every move I made was to protect her. "Mom, why the long face?" I asked, changing the subject. "By the way, has Li Yin been bothering you for money again?" Changle had told me that my younger brother had been trying to squeeze cash out of her. In the early years, my mother had been so broke she had to sell her own jewelry to pay for Li Yin's expenses. "No," she said softly. "I listened to you and didn't give him a cent." I cracked my knuckles, a dark look crossing my face. "Good. I think I need to go have a heart-to-heart talk with him. Some brothers just needed a good thrashing to remember their place. Otherwise, why did I spend years working out and building this much muscle since the day I transmigrated? Take it easy on him, my mother, Consort Yang, said with a sigh. If you hit him where it shows, it'll look bad when he goes out. She was speechless at my antics, but she didn't stop me. In her eyes, it was only right for me to discipline my younger brother, Liyin. He truly deserved a lesson. If he was afraid of losing face, he shouldn't cause trouble in the first place. Look at me, I said, feeling a bit smug. I get beaten all the time. Have I ever been afraid of losing face? I looked around to make sure we were alone, then leaned in close. Mom, I need you to do me a favor. She looked at me with curiosity. I rarely ever asked her for anything. Tell me, she whispered. I want you to invite some of your friends over, the wives of the high-ranking officials. Throw a party, a ladies-only gathering. And then? She asked, confused. The atmosphere in the Tang dynasty was quite open, and women could go out to shop freely, but she didn't see the point. She had a gentle nature, but she did have a circle of noble friends. I pointed to the full-length mirror standing nearby. Show off. Flaunt your mirror. Flaunt it hard. My mother wasn't slow. She immediately caught on to my plan. You, where do you get all these wicked ideas? Fine, I'll do it. Thanks, Mom. I'm heading out now. I need to find Changle. She has plenty of young friends to talk to. Go on then, she laughed. I know you can't sit still, but coming here to chat with me every few days, you're already doing better than most princes. Half of them don't even visit their mothers once they move out of the palace. I grinned and turned to leave. I'm leaving the rest of the mirrors here with you. Distribute them to the other consorts, but tell them they're gifts from father. My mother nodded, a soft sigh escaping her. She knew that if she were the empress, I would undoubtedly be the crown prince. I would have made a fine emperor. People saw me as a thug, but she knew how meticulous I actually was. By giving the credit to my father, Li Shimin, I was helping her gain favor with the other concubines while keeping the emperor happy. I left my mother's quarters and tracked down Changle. She had just returned with the younger princesses. Third brother, she said, surprised to see me again so soon. I need a favor, I whispered. Anything, she replied instantly. Go meet up with your sisters and friends. Invite them over. Your only goal is to show off your full-length mirror. When they ask where you got it, tell them they're for sale at the Yujian Inn. Changle's eyes crinkled into crescents as she smiled. She understood the game. She tilted her head thoughtfully. Third brother, do you have any smaller mirrors? I want to go visit my eldest sister-in-law. I gave her a big thumbs up. My sister was a natural at this. The eldest sister-in-law was the crown princess, the wife of my brother Li Chengqian. They had just married in January, and he doted on her. She came from an influential family and was currently busy building her own network in the capital. While other princes had to be careful about interacting with officials, the crown prince's estate was always bustling with visitors. If the crown princess started using my mirrors, every noble circle in the city would hear about it within a day. I'll send a large, high-quality one over to you shortly, I promised. You're amazing, Changle whispered. I can't believe you managed to scam 20,000 strings of cash out of father. Scam? What a terrible word, I teased, giving her a mock glare. That wasn't a scam. That was paternal love. Understand? It's a gift of love from our father. Changle burst out laughing. She had spent so much time around me that she was starting to talk just like me. I get it. Paternal love. Her face then turned serious. But brother, why did you take over those failing businesses and the refugees? They're just money pits. And what is this Tang Welfare Industrial Park you mentioned? I chuckled darkly. You don't understand. Selling products is fine, but the real money is in real estate. Real estate. She blinked at the new term. She could guess what it meant, but not the scale of it. You'll see soon enough. When I'm done, the Zhangsun family won't even be a blip on the radar. I believe you, she said, nodding firmly. I left the palace and headed straight for the Yujian Inn in the Shanhe district. My manager, Tian Ming, was waiting for me. We had secured 10,000 acres of land. In the Tang dynasty, that was roughly 5.5 square kilometers. To put it in perspective, that was the size of a major high-tech industrial zone in the future. It was more than enough. Your Highness, Tian Ming bowed as I arrived. How is it? I asked, looking at the building. The renovations are complete. We've temporarily stopped regular business to prepare. He led me inside. Though it was called an inn, I had bought up all the surrounding properties to expand it. The front was a modern-style bar and restaurant. Further back was a massive open courtyard surrounded by newly built multi-story buildings. If someone from the modern world saw this, they would recognize it instantly. It was a shopping mall. My plan was to create a one-stop destination for eating, drinking, and entertainment. People thought I spent my time in brothels because I liked the girls. Well, they weren't entirely wrong, but in this era, courtesans were artists. I wasn't just there for the company. I was there to scout talent and study the market. I walked through the luxury shopping area, satisfied. This place wasn't built for the commoners. It was a trap designed to drain the pockets of the rich. If you want to get rich, you have to take money from the people who actually have it. That was my golden rule. I walked through the rooms of the inn. The soft furnishings weren't in yet, but the floors were already finished. I had chosen high-quality birch wood for the floorboards. Its creamy white color brightened the entire space, making it feel open and clean. The current windows were still covered in specialized paper, which was standard for the Tang Dynasty, but it made the interior gloomy. Unless the windows were wide open, you couldn't see a thing. When can we start replacing these? I asked, pointing at the frames. I wasn't going to settle for paper. I wanted glass. Now that my workshops were finally producing it, I had the resources to move fast. With the strength of my ULI merchant firm, I could summon enough craftsmen to handle the job in no time. Your Highness, Tianming answered immediately. Given our current production speed, it will take about 10 days to fully replace every window in the inn. 10 days, that was acceptable. It wouldn't interfere with our production of silver mirrors or basic glass sheets. The process was complex, but once the furnaces were hot, things moved quickly. The only real challenge was the technique for pressing glass into flat plates. Our failure rate was still a bit high, but we didn't let the scraps go to waste. I sent the imperfect pieces to be installed in the less important rooms of my own estates. Focus on this in first, I commanded. And the silver mirrors? Will the supply be enough for the grand opening? Yes, Tianming nodded confidently. The jacquard looms are expected to be finished by tomorrow. As you ordered, we'll be weaving silk with various patterns right here for the shop. In this era, high-end silk patterns were all done by hand, one thread at a time. It was painfully slow. Complex designs had to be hand-embroidered, but my version of the jacquard loom would increase production speed by over 1,000 times. I was about to industrialize luxury. The cost would be so low it would make the great noble families weep. Of course, I wasn't going to sell it cheap. Commoners couldn't afford patterned silk anyway, so why give the aristocrats a discount? I'd keep the prices high enough to feel exclusive, but low enough to crush the competition. My silk would feature solid colors and intricate patterns that the women of the Tang Dynasty had never even dreamed of. It would drive them wild. Start with the samples, I said. And what about the restaurants? Everything is tested, Your Highness. The chefs are all in position. The cooking techniques you provided, they're going to be a sensation. We'll earn enough to buy half of Chang'an. Tianming looked at me with pure worship. He'd tasted the stir-fried dishes I introduced. Nothing in this world compared to them. He probably wondered how a prince like me knew so much about food. I just gave him a faint nod. And the soap? I asked. Production has started. The method isn't difficult, and we've already moved on to the scented varieties. Remember, I warned him, use different molds. We need a hierarchy. The packaging must reflect the grade, high, middle, and low. Don't sell the plain soap here yet. I have other plans for it. Plain soap was the key to another gold mine, degreasing wool. Right now, wool was barely used because of the stench. The nomadic Tujue people lived in wool tents, and honestly, if you were downwind, you could smell them from 50 meters away. Even the Tujue nobles in Chang'an, despite their fine clothes and daily baths, couldn't get rid of that sheep smell for years. If I could degrease the wool, I could turn it into high-end clothing. It would be worth more than silk. Tianming took a deep breath and bowed low. I understand, Your Highness. But what about the furniture for the meeting rooms? You mentioned custom tables and chairs. I'll have someone deliver those, I said, waving him off. Don't ask who. Yes, Your Highness. Tianming knew his place. He didn't push. Once the windows are in, I'll have the rest of the supplies ready. This is our flagship project. Get it right. I want our other locations in the East and West markets to follow this exact standard. And before you swap the windows, wrap the building in red silk. I don't want anyone seeing what's inside until we open. Understood. Good. I'm heading to the Huiwe brothel for a meal. Tianming blinked, looking confused. This early? The girls won't even be ready yet. They don't usually start until evening. I gave him a look of pure disdain. What do you know? I'm going there to appreciate the artistic talents of the top courtesans. You think I can appreciate art in the middle of a rowdy night? You're too vulgar, Tianming. You don't understand my pure intentions. My apologies, Your Highness. I was shallow, he stammered. He probably believed me, in a way. I was the most frequent visitor to the brothels in the city, yet I was also the most virtuous. I never brought a girl home. I was a man of discipline, mostly. I left the inn and climbed onto my horse. I hated carriages. They felt like they were trying to shake my ribs loose. Since galloping wasn't allowed in the outer city, I let the horse trot slowly toward the Pinkong district. The Huiwe brothel wasn't far. It sat right next to the Wuban district, which housed the famous Imperial Academy. Think about that for a second. The highest center of learning in the empire was right next door to the red light district. Even the great scholar Chu Suiliang lived in this neighborhood. In the Tang dynasty, visiting these places wasn't a scandal, it was a social life. People who thought I was just there for the girls clearly didn't understand the art of the era. I wasn't just there for the girls. I was there to appreciate the cultural life of this era. I moved quickly, leading my guards straight to the entrance of the Huiwe brothel. The moment I arrived, the attendants outside spotted me. They immediately doubled over in deep bows, their faces plastered with flattering smiles. Greetings, Your Highness, the Prince of Shu. Is the manager in? I asked, my voice flat. I'm coming in. Please, Your Highness. We are open for business today, they stammered, not daring to utter a single word of protest. Even if they weren't officially open, they wouldn't have dared to stop me. Years ago, some brave souls tried to block my way, and the aftermath was messy. This was the Tang dynasty. Things could have been worse for them. But since everyone knew I was the kind of man who would thrash even the eldest son of the Zhongsun family without blinking, they knew better than to treat me like a commoner. They had learned their lesson. When the Prince of Shu wants to enter, you let him in. He's the boss. Oh, opening this early today? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The Cold Food Festival is almost here, Your Highness, the attendant explained, bowing low. We opened early to get the atmosphere going. I nodded, realization hitting me. I'd been in this era for years, but I still got tripped up by the holidays. My habits from my past life were hard to break. Back then, we used the solar calendar, but here, everything followed the lunar cycles. The Cold Food Festival falls the day before the Qingming Festival. People are supposed to extinguish their fires and eat cold food, a tradition stretching back to the spring and autumn period. By the Tang dynasty, the day had evolved into a massive celebration. Beyond the traditional tomb sweeping, people went hiking, played kuju, and held cockfights. Life in Chang'an was vibrant, and the Huiwe brothel, being the city's premier entertainment hub, wasn't about to be left behind. It was ironic, really. The festival for the dead was always the liveliest time for the living. I didn't bother responding. I just stepped inside. One of the quicker attendants immediately shouted at the top of his lungs, "The Prince of Shu has arrived." Usually, people didn't announce arrivals here. Everyone came to have fun, not to put on airs. There were plenty of high-ranking officials, but it was generally a relaxed atmosphere. However, after one idiot made the mistake of bad-mouthing me behind my back, the brothel had to close for a day just to clean up the blood from the fight. Since then, Manager Liu made it a rule. When I arrived, the world had to know. That was just the level of status I held. I walked into the main hall and was greeted by a surprisingly rowdy scene. It was early, but several tables were already packed. I scanned the room and saw a few familiar faces. The sons of the city's elite were already waiting. "Yo, the Prince of Shu is here," a burly young man shouted from a nearby table. I raised an eyebrow. This was Cheng Huailiang, the second son of the Duke of Lu, Cheng Yaojin. In the history I knew, he was supposed to marry Princess Qinghe, but since I had spent all my energy sabotaging my sister Lizzie's wedding, Qinghe's marriage hadn't happened yet either. Qinghe was another of my sisters, though her mother wasn't a high-ranking consort, so she lived a quiet, isolated life. She was shy and we weren't close, but I always made sure to send her gifts. She probably liked me more than most of our other siblings. I walked over and pulled up a chair at their table. Sitting there was Yuchi Baolin, the son of Yuchi Gong. He was older, 26, and already held an official post. Next to him were Qin Huaidao, the son of Qin Xiong, and Li Dijian, the son of the legendary Li Jing. "Greetings, Your Highness," they said, saluting me. "What are you guys doing here?" I asked. "We were bored," Yuchi Baolin said with a dark, mischievous grin. "It's our day off. I heard you mention at court that the Huiwa brothel has a new star courtesan. We came to see if the rumors were true. I even heard you invited the crown prince." I rolled my eyes. That was just talk. But yes, there are new girls. I actually got along well with the sons of the generals. We shared a certain bluntness. It was the scholarly types I couldn't stand. They looked down on me, thinking I was a crude man, even cruder than their own warrior fathers. It was ridiculous, pot calling the kettle black. "I actually went looking for you today," Yuchi Baolin said, pointing at the others. "But you weren't in the city, so I told these guys to come here first. When it comes to visiting brothels, you're the professional. We're counting on you. We're usually too busy with official duties to learn the ropes." "Screw off," I snapped, though I was half smiling. "Your Highness," Li Dijian whispered, leaning in. "I heard Du He and Fong Yai are coming later. What do you think? Should we stir up some trouble tonight?" I tapped the table, my expression calm. "Do I look like a violent person to you? Why is your first thought always bullying people?" Yuchi Baolin, Li Dijian, and Qin Huaidao all stared at me. Their faces said it all. Yes. Yes, you are exactly that person. The Prince of Shu? What about him? That brat doesn't know a damn thing about culture. A slurred, drunken voice drifted down from the balcony above. My eyebrow twitched. Are you kidding me? You're going to disrespect me right to my face? I looked up and saw a stumbling figure making his way down the stairs. It was barely afternoon, and he was already wasted. Judging by his expensive robes, he was royalty. Only a royal would be stupid enough to insult me in public. As he turned his blurry gaze toward our table, I recognized him immediately. It was Li Yuanshang, the Prince of Lu. He was my father's seventh brother, my uncle. Though, technically, he was only a year older than me. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, my face cold. Hey, Yuchi Baolin grabbed my arm, looking worried. "Sanling, brother, please. I'll call you big brother if I have to. Didn't you just say you aren't a violent person? Forget it. He's drunk. Besides, he's your uncle. If you lay a hand on him." He was right. That was Li Yuanchang up there, my seventh uncle. "Who said I was going to hit him?" I asked, looking at Baolin with a blank stare. "Am I really that violent?" I shrugged his hand off and stood tall. Baolin sighed, knowing better than to keep pulling. They all knew my temperament. I was more hot-headed than any of these military brats. I hadn't technically beaten up any of my elders yet, but that didn't mean I wasn't willing to start. I didn't say a word. I just reached down, grabbed a full jar of wine from the table, and started heading up the stairs. No, I beg you." Qin Huaidao lunged forward, grabbing my other arm. "One hit with that jar, and you'll kill him." What? Does the Prince of Shu really want to lay hands on his own uncle? Li Yuanchang stammered, stumbling down the steps toward me. The manager of the Gray Moon brothel, old Lu, came scurrying out from the back, his face pale. He leaned in close to me, whispering urgently, "Your Highness, please, I beg of you. Have mercy. Why waste your breath on a drunkard?" "He's right, brother," Yuchi Baolin added, his voice frantic. "It's not worth it. Just let it go." The other nobles sitting at the nearby tables watched with wide eyes, but they stayed back. None of them had the guts or the status to interfere when two princes were about to clash. I looked at Baolin and gave him a cold, thin smile. "Baolin, you know me. Everyone knows my tolerance for alcohol is pathetic." Before anyone could react, I lifted the heavy wine jar and began pouring it straight down my throat. I knew the wine in this era well. There was no distillation technology yet, so the alcohol content was weak, maybe 15 to 20% at most. Thanks to whatever changes my body went through during transmigration, I could drink several of these jars and feel nothing but a bloated stomach. I wouldn't even get a buzz. But in this life, I had a reputation to maintain. To avoid having to drink with the military brats every night, I had spent years pretending to be a lightweight. Everyone in the capital's elite circles knew that Li Ke couldn't hold his liquor. The crowd stared in stunned silence as I chugged the entire jar like it was water. When it was empty, I slammed the jar onto the floor, shattering it into pieces. I let out a loud, long burp. Then, I let my eyes glaze over and started slurring my words. You. It was you, wasn't it? I pointed a shaky finger at Li Yuanchang. Let me tell you something. Today, I don't care if it's you. Even if my old man, the former Prince of Qin, even if the Emperor himself showed up, I'd still have to have a word with him. I might not win that fight, but I'd still take a swing. The onlookers were speechless. It was a move of pure genius, or madness. They had tried to stop me from hitting a drunk man, so I simply turned myself into a bigger drunk. The girls on the stage stopped playing their instruments, looking on with worry. They all loved the Prince of Shu. Unlike the other officials who treated them like property, I treated them like human beings. I joked with them and talked to them as equals. Every girl in the house would have jumped into my bed in a heartbeat, but they knew I didn't come here for that. They had seen me fight before, but they had never seen me pull a stunt like this. Li Yuanchang's drunken fog cleared instantly. He wasn't actually as wasted as he looked. He had a grudge against me that I had long forgotten. A few years back, I had beaten up some of his servants for trying to convince a common girl to become his concubine. I had protected the girl, and he had hated me ever since. He had come out today specifically to provoke me, thinking that as an uncle, he was untouchable. He figured I'd never dare strike an elder in public. He never expected me to down a whole jar of wine and throw my sanity out the window. Li Ke, what are you doing? Li Yuanchang shouted, his voice trembling. I didn't answer. He turned to run, but I was faster. Even while stumbling, I lunged forward and grabbed his collar from behind. Bullying the young, are we? I yelled, dragging him to the floor. Think you're safe because of your rank? Think you can pick on your nephew? I tackled him, pinned him to the ground, and straddled his chest. My fist flew down before he could even scream. The crowd watched the violence unfold, but nobody moved. Who would dare interfere in a fight between two princes? Especially when one of them was the notoriously hot-headed Prince of Shu, who was currently blackout drunk. If you touched him now, you were just asking for a beating yourself. Stop. Stop it. I was wrong, Li Yuanchang wailed. He was a scholar, a man of calligraphy and painting. He looked down on me as a brute who lacked refinement. But refinement didn't help much when a fist was hitting your face. I knew exactly where to strike. I had been fighting since I was 9. I had beaten Zhang Sunchong over 100 times. I knew exactly how to cause maximum pain without actually breaking any bones. Please, young masters, do something, old Lu cried, bowing repeatedly to Yuchi Baolin. Persuade the prince to stop. Baolin looked at the floor, refusing to meet his eyes. Old Lu, it's not that I don't want to help. But look at him. I value my life. If I try to stop a drunk Li Ke, I'm the one who's going to end up in the infirmary. Don't let Yuchi Baolin and his group of young generals fool you. They came from legendary warrior families, but even combined, they couldn't take me in a real fight. I had the raw experience they lacked. I knew how to move, how to strike, and how to keep my own skin intact. I was the kind of person who refused to ever be on the receiving end of a beating. Old Lu, the manager, looked like he had swallowed a bitter melon. His 40-year-old face was a mask of pure misery. To be fair, I was usually his favorite customer. As long as you didn't provoke me, I was easier to serve than any other prince or noble in the city. I didn't care about status. But when I decided to cause trouble, I went all out. Now that I had just thrashed another prince in his establishment, old Lu was probably wondering if his business would even survive the night. I was wrong. I was wrong. Stop, Li Yuanchang shrieked. He clearly lacked the experience of my usual punching bag, Zhang Sunchong. If this were Zhang Sunchong, he would have already curled into a ball, covered his head, and waited for me to get tired. He knew that was the fastest way to make it end. But Li Yuanchang was still trying to fight back. He squirmed and twisted, making it even easier for me to pin him. I straddled his chest, my legs locking him in place like a vice. Every time he moved, he just gave me a better angle for my fists. If Zhang Sunchong were here, he would have told him to just lie there and take it. I finally let out a long breath and stood up. My heart was racing. Beating someone up while pretending to be blackout drunk was actually exhausting. I stood up too fast, and for a second, the room actually did spin. Listen to me, I slurred, pointing a shaky finger at him. You better go tell my father right now. Go complain. If you wait until tomorrow, it'll be too late. I stumbled to the side, and Yuchi Baolin quickly caught my arm to steady me. I wasn't done yet. I turned back and glared at the pathetic mess on the floor. No, wait, I corrected myself. You go tell my grandfather. Yeah, tell the retired emperor. I'll be the one to tell my father on you. Yuchi Baolin nearly choked trying to hold back a laugh. He leaned in and whispered, Your Highness, do you think this is a playground fight? You're both going to run to your parents. The surrounding crowd was struggling just as hard to keep a straight face. They wanted to laugh, but they knew better. If they laughed now, they might be the next ones running home to their fathers with a black eye. Li Yuanchang opened his mouth to say something, some kind of threat, no doubt, but one look at my face silenced him. His left cheek was already purple and swollen. He scrambled to his feet and fled the building in total disgrace. With the Prince of Han gone, old Lu finally exhaled. He wasn't worried about revenge. This wasn't the brothel's fault, and Li Yuanchang would be too embarrassed to bring the law into it. Besides, if things got ugly, the local officials usually looked out for him. But more importantly, he had me. I was a troublemaker, but I never let innocent bystanders take the fall for my messes. If someone tried to blame the shop, I would be the first one there to shut them down. Move. Get out of the way, I said, shoving Yuchi Baolin aside. I looked at him and his friends with pure disdain. I can't stand you guys. You're so fake. Everyone knows why you're at a place like this. You want these women, but you act like you're only here for the high culture and the music. It's pathetic. The Prince of Han started with you, not me. Baolin complained. Why are you attacking us now? Up on the stage, the four famous beauties of the house giggled behind their sleeves. They didn't mind my bluntness at all. I ignored the guys and stumbled toward the central platform where the performers stood. Ching Chun, I called out. Give me a hand. I'm coming, Your Highness, one of the beauties chirped. A gorgeous young woman rushed down from the stage, her eyes sparkling with genuine delight. She didn't hesitate to wrap her arms around mine, supporting my weight as she led me up to a plush chair on the platform. Are you all right, Your Highness? Does your hand hurt? All four of them swarmed me instantly, chirping like birds and fussing over me. I sat there, basking in the attention, while Baolin and the others watched with eyes full of envy. These weren't ordinary streetwalkers. These women were elite. They might eventually leave to become a nobleman's concubine, but they didn't just sleep with anyone who walked through the door. You couldn't force them. You had to win them over.